All right. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Can anybody hear me out there? If you can hear me, you can press one. Say something in the chat. Steve Technologies was good, bruh. This is Geopolitics episode 236. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Dock it in the description beneath the video for you to follow along with as usual. So I'm a little bit late. I actually lost the docket. The initial docket that had the original articles on it. I had to go back and try to gather up what was left of it. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what happened to it. Um, so my apologies. Getting the hangout started. Give you guys another minute to come in before we get started, man. It's already late as it is. We're about maybe 30 minutes behind. If you guys didn't check out the open chat from last night, open chat number 3, in your spare time, man, you should actually check it out. One of the dopest hangouts we've had in a long time. Brother Dr. Phoenix came through and blessed us with a lot of healthcare and medical information, things that most other channels are not talking about right now. So definitely check that out. I'm surprised that we got a thumbs down before the video even started, before the live stream even started. Mike Hamilton, what's going on, bro? Jordan Bevel, what's going on? Yeah, we got a thumbs down already before the hangout even started. I guess people don't like, the Iranians shooting down U.S. drones and whatnot. So we'll get started at 9 o'clock sharp. See people coming in, so we're starting at a good time, anyways. Says the Chirac Honker. It's an interesting name. Iran are nutcases. I don't want to take up arms against them. I don't think anybody said you had to. Well, we're going to get started with the hangout. So let me share my screen. All right, so first item on the docket is from the BBC. Ethiopia army chief shot dead in coup bid attacks. He and another officer died trying to prevent a coup attempt against the administration in Ethiopia's northern Amhara region. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said in Amhara itself, regional governor um, Abachu McKinnon was killed along with an advisor. The government says the situation is under control after arrests were made. The prime minister has gone on TV to urge Ethiopians to unite in the face of evil forces set on dividing the country. The U.S. State Department has warned its staff in Addis Ababa to stay inside. Ethnic violence has hit Amhara and other parts of Ethiopia in recent years. Since his election last year, Mr. Abiy has moved to end political recession by releasing political prisoners, removing bans on political parties, and prosecuting officials accused of human rights abuses. Africa's oldest independent country, Ethiopia, is also the continent's second most populous after Nigeria, with 102.5 million inhabitants from more than 80 different ethnic groups. A transfer hub for long haul air travel, it has one of the fastest growing economies in the world, but a vast number of young Ethiopians are without work. So, what do we know? General Sear was killed on Saturday evening at his residence, along with another general, uh, Abera, by a bodyguard who is now in custody. The Prime Minister's press office says the government says it has reason to think the attack was linked to assassination of the governor of Amara a few hours earlier in the region's capital, Bahir Dar. Mr. Abachu was killed at a meeting in his office during his senior advisor, Izzy Weiss, while the region's attorney general was wounded. The prime minister's office accused Amara's regional security chief, Brigadier General Tsisi, of plotting the coup attempt. It is unclear whether he has been arrested. Many of those involved in the coup attempt are under arrest, and operations are in progress to detain others, the Prime Minister press office said. The coup attempt in Amara regional state is against the Constitution and is intended to scupper the hard-won peace of the region. It added. The illegal attempt should be condemned by all Ethiopians, and the federal government has full capacity to overpower this armed group. So, what it sounds like to me, and I could be wrong about this, is that there's a peace agreement between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and certain powers may want to disrupt that. There's been bad blood between the two countries, and now that Ethiopia is a landlocked country, the only real closest access that they can have to port water or egress is through Eritrea. So there's bound to be some suspicion here, at least by my analysis and observation, that someone doesn't want this relationship to mend. They want to keep it separated. So we'll wait to see what happens. You know, Israel has been responsible for taking down Morsi in Egypt, also taking down the Sudanese government under Omar al-Bashir. They've also been involved in supplying arms to al-Shabaab. So we also know that they've been involved in Libya. So make no mistakes that there's a outside power involved in this. This doesn't just happen on its own. A real coup attempt means that you're going straight for the throne, and this isn't the throne. This is too small on a scale for it to be a true coup attempt. All right, let me get to the next article. All right, this one is from the nationalreview.com. Turkey's Africa strategy threatens to breed Islamist extremism. When the Carter and Reagan administrations began supporting Islamists in Afghanistan, few policymakers recognized the Pandora's box they were opening. The great global threat, after all, was communism. And even if radical Islamicism was a threat, as early as 1946, the U.S. intelligence community predicted it would be. Afghanistan was a half a world away. While the notion that the Pentagon and the CIA once allied themselves with the Taliban and Al Qaeda is a popular but archaeological myth, the blowback from Cold War support for Islamists is hard to dispute. Hard ringing about hard ringing about Islamist terrorism and the post 9/11 global war on terrorism created a smokescreen that obscured China's rise and distracted from Russia's resurgence. Cold War leaders may have chosen to weaponize Islamism against communism, but they did not create it. Extremism comes in many sectarian shades and has evolved independently against a sense of malaise within various Muslim societies, sometimes because of European inroads and imperialism, and sometimes for entirely different reasons. Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, 1703 to 1791, preached in a conservatism in Central Arabia in order to reverse moral decline among his contemporary society and to return Islam to its fundamentals. Such Wahhabism was austere and extreme, but like Arabia's interior, largely irrelevant in the broader Islamic world. That changed in the second half of the 20th century when Saudi Arabia became the world's top oil exporter. The late historian Bernard Lewis explained what happened next as Saudi Arabia used its petrodollars to fuel extremism. Imagine that the Ku Klux Klan gets total control of the state of Texas, Lewis explained. And the Ku Klux Klan has its disposal all all the oil rigs in Texas. And they used the money to set up a well endowed network of colleges and schools throughout Christendom, peddling their peculiar brand of Christianity. You would have you would then have an approximate equivalent of what happened in the modern Muslim world. In Congress and in the broader foreign policy establishment today, Saudi Arabia is a political football. Americans rightly resent both the complicity of the Saudi officials in the 9/11 terror attacks and subsequent efforts by the executive branch to suppress the information. Recent Saudi behavior has also been poor. It is interesting, whether it is arresting bloggers such as Raif Badawi, murdering columnist and former intelligence operative Jamal Khashoggi, or killing civilians in Yemen. But as my colleague Danielle Plechter notes, Saudi Arabia has been a problematic ally since the beginning. But arguably, Saudi Arabia today is better than it has been in many years. For its part, Iran is worse. She is right. Saudi Arabia changed not in reaction to 9/11, but after Al Qaeda terrorists began targeting the kingdom itself in 2003. Today, the various boisterous, vociferous, boisterous criticism of Saudi radicalism is directed against Saudi activities in the period before 2003 rather than in more recent years. Saudi Arabia and its allies, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Bahrain, may be authoritarian, but they do not promote and no longer tolerate radicalism. Turkey and Qatar, the world's only other Wahhabi state, are today the chief engines for Islamic extremism. Qatar is predictable but not creative. Whenever there is a conflict within a Muslim society, it bankrolls the extreme elements, be they in Gaza, Libya, or Syria. Turkey plays a much longer game. Consider Africa. After failing with zero problems with our neighbors and neo-Ottomanism, I'm sorry about that. What did I just leave off? Oh, after failing with zero problems with our neighbors and neo-Ottomanism and having become toxic throughout much of Europe and the Middle East, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan turned his sights on Africa. Western diplomats may focus on more immediate disputes about Turkey's arms purchase it places in NATO and its human rights violations, but they largely ignore Erdogan's aggressive, expensive, and ideological campaign across the African continent. In 2008, the African Union formally declared Turkey to be a strategic partner, and 5 years later, Turkey inaugurated a Turkey-Africa Partnership Initiative. Erdogan has become perhaps the most frequent non-African leader to visit the continent. In the first 4 years after assuming Turkey's presidency in 2014, he visited 20 African states and hosted 30 heads of state in Turkey. Turkey also inaugurated regular Turkey-Africa summits, twice in Istanbul and one in Malabo, the capital of Equatorial Guinea. Between 2008 and 2018, Turkey has quadrupled the number of embassies and consulates it has on the continent. Turkey's initial strategy began with both investment and aid. Between 2000 and 2013, Turkey's trade with sub-Saharan Africa increased exponentially to $7.5 billion. If North Africa and the Maghreb are thrown into the mix, Turkish trade was more than double than even that figure. Seldom did a high-level Turkish official visit Africa without a delegation of businessmen in tow. It was a strategy that paid off in Somalia, Sudan, Tanzania. State-owned Turkish Airlines leapt ahead and competitors and now ranks in the number of cities served in Africa. This was part of a deliberate strategy to make Istanbul a hub for Africa. Turkey's Anadolu agency established a major bureau in Ethiopia and several others across the continent. As Turkey has invested in Africa, it has sought to promote itself in more extreme Islamist interpretations at the expense of the West and post-World War II liberal order. That Africa can trust only. Turkey is a constant theme of Turkish rhetoric. The Daily Sabah, a mass circulation paper seized by Erdogan's government and transferred to a company controlled by his son-in-law, suggested that the United Nations stole $55 billion meant for Somalia, and that was the only one example. I'm not going to read any more of this, but the gist here is that Turkey has ambitions of expansion and not dependent on the West. If they can milk the natural resources out of the continent, that's their goal, is to get what they want out of the continent, as well as find allies because they're going to need allies in the next conflict. Saudi Arabia has lots of allies in the Middle East and in Africa on the continent itself. Well, if that's going to be the case, um, you're going to need some help if you're Turkey, because Turkey has a score to settle with Saudi Arabia, with the kingdom. So they see themselves as one, as a kingdom, because they were a former Ottoman Empire. They have no interest in bowing down to Riyadh. So if they can get the Wahhabis out, what they consider to be the Wahhabis in Riyadh and Mecca and Jeddah, they will do whatever it takes to get them out. So that's my opinion.
And there's also an ethnic, what I would, which kind of runs kind of strong. I don't think people really talk about it that much, but I definitely know people here. One of my brothers, very good friends, who happens to be Saudi Arabian. Um, there's a big ethnic angle between the Persians and the Arabs. That's a big part of this as well. And I know that people don't talk about that, but that plays a big role. Mike,
What's going on, Nicole?
what's going on, man?
Chilling, man, chilling. Just got started, so.
I mean, do you agree with that or you disagree?
No, I agree with that. There's definitely a ethnic role in this, as well as language,
For
Farsi
sure.
versus Arabic. So,
For sure.
all right, let me get to the next article. All right, this one is from Newsweek. Russia gets two more allies in its plans for Syria as U.S. strategy increasingly questioned. Russia has secured the support of two more regional allies in its efforts to end the 8-year civil war in Syria, as the United States' own approach has increasingly come under scrutiny. Speaking Wednesday to the state-run TASS Russian news agency, Russian Special Envoy to Syria, Alexandra uh, Leventrev, described recent talks with Lebanon and Iraq as having been held in a benevolent and friendly atmosphere. He said that both countries commend the efforts made by Russia in recent years to maintain the unity of Syria, their neighbor country, and have reaffirmed their interest in the continued Russian efforts on the Syrian regulation. The attitude of both countries' leadership regarding Russia is very positive. At the same time, as it was stated during the talks, both Beirut and Baghdad want to maintain their partnership with the USA and the West without undermining their relations with Russia. Furthermore, he revealed that leaders from both Arab countries and bordering Syria, uh, countries bordering Syria, stated that they would send representative delegations to Kazakhstan's capital, where an international meeting on Syria will be held in July. The news was confirmed in separate readouts released by the Iraqi and Lebanese governments. Lebanese President Michael Aoun thanked Russian President Vladimir Putin for his interest in Lebanon and noted that Beirut's participation did not preclude independent talks with Damascus and resettling over 1 million Syrian refugees currently in Lebanon, according to his office. Meanwhile, Iraqi Prime Minister um, Abdul 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 Mahdi expressed his thanks for an appreciation for the positions of President Putin in support of Iraq and his pride in the development of relations and satisfaction of the common desire to expand them in all fields, as cited by his office. Lebanon and Iraq's relationship with Syria were complex even before the outbreak of the rebel and jihadi uprising in 2011. Syria played a pivotal role in ending Lebanon's own civil war in 1990 and held extensive control over Beirut's political system before being expelled amid an uprising in 2005. While Damascus' relationship with Baghdad, marked by decades of rivalry under Saddam Hussein, actually improved the following year as a new Iraqi government took over the wake of the 2003 U.S. invasion. Lebanon and Iraq have extensive ties to Syria, or extensive ties to Syria's main regional supporter, Iran, as well. Though opposition parties in both countries have also expressed deep criticism of the Islamic Republic's growing regional influence. Still, influential Lebanese and Iraqi Shiite Muslim movements joined Tehran and back in Damascus when Syria's civil war broke out, and battled Islamist forces at home, too, and as a regional instability erupted in the following years. Despite maintaining links with Iran and Syria, Lebanon and Iraq have also managed to keep up relations with the U.S., which was regularly warned of Iranian influence in both countries and has accused the Syrian government of war crimes. Though the U.S. supported the uprising against the Syrian government and has continued to call for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to step down, Lebanon and Iraq have largely stood by him, fearing the fallout of further volatility in neighboring Syria. The Syrian military has since regained large swaths of Syrian territory, especially following Russia's 2015 intervention. Moscow and Tehran have formed a strategic alliance, also involving Damascus and Baghdad, and supported to some degree by Beirut. With Islamic State militant group ISIS largely defeated in battles between the Syrian government opposition and jihadi forces largely isolated to the country's northwest, Russia has sought to further bring Lebanon and Iraq on board to bolster a joint venture to end the war. Turkey, the last major supporter of Syrian rebels, joined Russia and Iran in 2017 to form a trilateral peace process based largely in the Kazakh capital of Astana. Since renamed Nursultan, while the U.S. has mostly dismissed this framework in favor of an off-stalled process based on Geneva, Washington's shifting Syria strategy has repeatedly generated frustration from friends and foes alike. So Russia is swallowing up these different countries in terms of the security framework. And what they've done so far is they become the security guarantor of the region. They have Syria, they have Iraq behind them, they have Turkey with the S-400 system and different future operations coming, and they have Lebanon now. So from the Mediterranean all the way back to the Caspian Sea, Russia has created a security framework that is that has basically marginalized the United States from the region. They're not really that relevant anymore. BGS, what's going on, bro? You do or you should have the link in your email. So as it stands right now, Moscow controls the Middle East, not the United States. Although you do have troops in Qatar, and maybe some troops inside Saudi Arabia and Jordan, and you could throw Israel in there as well. Russia is the security guarantor of the Middle East right now, as it stands. So from Libya, Egypt, Russia has been planning military bases inside Egypt, naval and airborne divisions inside Egypt. Lebanon now, Cyprus, good relations with Israel, strong relations in Syria, good relations in Turkey, new relations in Iraq, and then you take in Azerbaijan, Armenia, Iran. They have strong support from the Taliban, um, and working with the Taliban by creating a consulate for the Taliban inside outside of Moscow, and they have strong relations with India and Pakistan. Russia controls the Middle East from that far. So
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely correct. And what they've done is they've been more intelligent in the region because they've taken a lot of advantages of the mistakes that we made, and they've formed alliances where we haven't done so successfully. And they are in a great position. They're in a great position, and they can stop some things that may come down in that region, i.e., and I'm talking about a war with Iran. I believe that they could play a very key role in keeping that from happening with the United States. So we've made a lot of mistakes. We made some big mistakes going into Iraq, and certainly that put Iraq into Iran's hands when
mhm.
we did that.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
I'm sorry. I apologize. I just had a call coming through. I'm sorry.
mhm.
And we've had a lot of issues that have actually started to fall down from there. So I think our short-sightedness and some of the big mistakes we made in the region have certainly given Russia an opportunity to play a strong role. Where Russia, quite frankly, was in a position back in the early '80s, especially with respect to the Afghani war and everything else like that they got involved in, where they were more of a looked upon as more of a negative force, and now they've turned that around through some of the key mistakes of our United States policy and military.
Mhm.
So, you know, they've operated intelligently over the last 30 years there,
Yeah,
in my view. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because they're a neutral player. They don't go in and take sides and stuff like that, like the United States does. You know, you had John McCain before he died. You know, dancing in Syria with these jihadis. You know, after they done cut some 13-year-old boy's head off his shoulders.
Yeah, Zil.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I wish I could find the picture and post it up. Actually, I will do so right now. Um, Black Gnostics. If you want to get on the panel, you should have a link in your email. Um, Black Gnostics says, the SEO controls the Middle East, including Pakistan. That's true in theory, but China hasn't lifted a finger in terms of military power, and that's been the discussion all the last couple of years. When is China gonna stop playing on the sideline and actually get themselves into the field and actually do some of this heavy lifting from a military standpoint? Um, Russia, countries are running to Russia. They're not running to China. Bashar al-Assad didn't go to Beijing. You know, the president or the prime minister of Lebanon didn't go to to Shanghai. They ran to Moscow. Everybody's running to Moscow for help, including the Africans. You're seeing Omar al-Bashir before he was overthrown. He ran to Moscow. That's right, BGS. We have that article in the docket too. We'll cover that. Yeah, here it is right here.
Another thing about India, you can't talk about India without talking about Pakistan.
Hmm.
You just can't. You cannot separate the two. Just wanted to say that very quickly.
Yeah, so this is a picture for those of you in the chat watching. This is John McCain with the terrorists. I mean, literally before he died. This is John McCain hanging out with terrorists. I'm surprised he doesn't have a hijab on his head or something like that. Keep his pale skin from melting. But That's John McCain. That's the United States government. You know, years later, before John McCain, there was Brzezinski in Afghanistan. Two stepping it with the with the Mujahideen. So we see the same sort of we see the same sort of playbook being recycled over and over. All right, let me get to this next article. All right, this one should be quick. All right, this one is from futurism.com. The Russian military has begun combat tests for new lasers and hypersonic weapons. In the near future, the Russian armed forces will receive a completely new, unparalleled weapon based on hypersonic and laser energy technologies. Russian Minister of Defense Sergei Shoigu said per a Russian military press release. Its first samples have already been put on the trial combat duty. If Russia is already testing its laser cannons and has figured out how to build hypersonic weapons, then it could change the balance of international military power and change the face of warfare forever. Shoigu went on to explain how enhanced intelligence systems would improve the Russian military's readiness to deploy the high-tech new weapons, describing how it would better manage the flow of information and logistics of combat. The Strelets command control and intelligence system enable the troops to engage the targets in almost real time, 8 to 12 minutes after the detection, said Shoigu in a separate press release. 8 to 12 minutes is very fast. Last month, Putin bragged about Russia's latest laser weapons program. The new update that the country has begun testing the weapons in combat shows that the future of warfare filled with terrifying new weapons is very nearly here. So, Russia has new toys, and they're not afraid to exercise, to flex on everybody. So, hey, Dr. Phoenix, if you want to get on the panel, actually, let me shoot you a link. All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from Express.co. Revealed how Putin's missiles could reach U.S. coast in 6 minutes from Cuba warship. The Admiral Korstov landed in Havana waters yesterday for a 2-day visit as tensions between Russia and the U.S. continue to rise, in a move that many are comparing to the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. President Putin appears to be putting on a show of military might just miles from America's coast, and with the powerful ship having to be escorted off the British coast by the Royal Navy in March, it has left Western governments fearing its true capabilities. Interesting.
So missiles October once again. I don't know, man. That last one was a real shaky one we had. We came very close to getting pretty live. I remember listening to Castro some years ago. This is before he left office, and said, had the United States invaded Cuba, he would have fired those missiles on the United States. I don't know, man.
I mean, a lot of people don't really realize that America had missiles inside Turkey pointed at Russia.
Yeah. They sure did, and that was part of the agreement when we removed those missiles, when the Russians removed the missiles from Cuba quietly behind closed doors. It wasn't talked about in the press. The missiles were removed from Turkey. But what was really scary was the submarine activity that was going on during that period of time, which no one ever speaks about as well. So I just don't think we want to kind of revisit those days if we can avoid them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The thing is, they don't have to be close to American shores anymore with these hypersonic missiles. Now you're talking about those suckers can be launched from a satellite, or they can be launched from air. One of the Tupolovs, the Russian strategic stealth bombers. You have no idea where that missile is going to come from, and there's no way for you to respond to it.
Yeah, I mean, it can come from a lot of different places. It can come from under the water as well. So I think that was one of the big pieces that nobody talked about during the first crisis, of which is still, a situation like that now. So just talking about any kind of activity coming out of Cuba with respect to Russia and saber rattling in each other's hemispheres and military spaces, I think is inherently dangerous.
Mm-hmm. All right, this next one is from CNBC.com. NATO says it will act unless Russia destroys nuclear-ready missile. NATO said Russia must destroy its short-range nuclear-ready cruise missile system, or the alliance will be forced to respond. The U.S. has previously said it will quit a decades-old missile treaty with Russia if the latter fails to destroy the missile, labeled the SSC-8 by NATO. The 1987 INF treaty between the U.S. and Russia sought to eliminate nuclear and conventional missiles, as well as their launches with the short ranges 310 to 620 miles and intermediate ranges of 620 to 3,420 miles. Just to give you guys a rough estimate of what 3,000 miles is, 3,000 miles would be something like from Bangor, Maine, all the way down to the southern tip of California. That's how far that missile will travel. The 1987 INF treaty between the U.S. and Russia sought to eliminate nuclear and conventional missiles as well as launches. NATO has said the SSC-8 violates those terms and that Russia has been deploying the system at locations which could threaten countries across Europe. Got some noise in the background. Please put yourself on mute. Speaking at a press conference in Brussels Tuesday, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said Russia had just 5 weeks to scrap the system and save the treaty. We call on Russia to take a responsible path. Unfortunately, we have seen no indication that Russia intends to do so. Stoltenberg will chair a meeting of NATO member defense ministries which is due to begin Wednesday. He said that gathering, which will include U.S. Acting Defense Secretary Mark Esper, would look in would look at NATO's next steps in the event that Russia does not comply. The NATO chief said the response will be defensive, measured, and coordinated, but would not result in the deployment of land-based nuclear missiles. As a result, in deploying new missiles, we must ensure our deterrent is effective. This is NATO's job. At the same press conference, Stoltenberg outlined the breakdown of individual country contributions to defensive among member nations. The NATO guideline sits at 2% of gross domestic product (GDP), but only around 7 of the 29 countries are expected to satisfy that target by 2019. Those countries are Latvia, Poland, Romania, and the UK, Estonia, Greece, and the United States. The U.S. is by far the biggest spender on defense, routing around 3.5% of its GDP total towards the sector. NATO said that its estimate for 2019 would see the levels of NATO member cash spent on defense rise about 3.9% from 2018. So Latvia, Poland, Romania, they have Estonia too. You could throw Estonia in as well. They have a lot of reason to spend that kind of GDP on defense, or on the agreement that they have with NATO, especially Greece. Right, Greece has issues with Turkey, and they fear that Turkey may come in there and basically gut their country out. I mean, they're already occupying one of their islands right now, if not many of their islands illegally. Somehow they're a part of NATO. One of the agreements of NATO is that you have to have defined borders. But if you're occupying someone's country, and the international community allegedly doesn't recognize it, how can you have defined borders then? Anyways, I say all that to say that NATO NATO countries that border Russia do not want a conflict with Russia. They'll be the first ones to get the brunt of the force that Russia responds with. Meanwhile, Western European countries like Germany and France and the UK, they're 1,000 miles away. They don't have to really worry about the conflict all that much. Brother Black Gnostic, please jump in. What's going on, bro?
Yeah, well, the problem with with that is once NATO engages Russia, how long before you start getting missiles? Doesn't matter that you're 1,000 miles away, you're gonna get missiles.
Yeah, you'll get missiles, but the first 24 minutes, they're gonna go right through your neighboring countries, and that's what I'm saying. That they be more worried about that than anything else, because they're not prepared for a fight.
Well, none of them are. Well, none of Europe really is prepared for a fight. They really don't have any armies.
Yeah, we saw to that after the Second World War. So we were there to kind of protect them and deal with that. So it would be us. So any neighboring or any bordering states to this conflict is, without question, that they're not going to want to see anything like that. And no one else who's further away, 1,000 miles away, going to want to see, like BGS says, missiles.
Yeah.
People are not going to want to see this.
Yeah.
This is a symmetrical war that will take a massive toll on a lot of people very quickly, and this is something that I think people do not want to see, and this is why NATO and everything like this has been formed, to see that this doesn't happen. So anyway, go ahead, BGS. I'm sure.
Yeah, well, NATO was formed to do two things: one, keep the Russians off of Europe's ass, and also keep the three major powers from fighting each other again.
That is correct. I had reviewed once again George Kennan's X article. Do you remember that one, BGS?
I don't think so.
You don't remember the X article?
Mm-mm.
Mike, you don't remember that, do you?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, well, Rich Kenyon, who was former
CIA.
the not only CIA but State Department
Okay.
executive, um, wrote an article in the 50s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, wrote an article in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the X article, and it was first anonymously written. No one knew who wrote it, but it was a actual, kind of a treatise on containment, and it was about the containment of the Russians, and even looked at Russia not even from the standpoint of the Soviet Union, but if, let's say, the Soviet Union didn't exist, it would still be, a very powerful state against the West, and what were some of the prophylaxis that we should have against such a state, and or a threat, and how to contain them, and certainly, NATO certainly was a big piece, but also, not only was NATO just a political way, but he was looking at, very strong, military involvement, and that's the reason for so many of our bases and so forth that we actually kind of put out there, and really try to contain any Russian aggression by, us having large shows of forces around the globe, and really putting a ring around the Soviet Union, or
Soviet Union and China.
And China, putting a ring around them, and we have a ring around China as well, which
you fought the Korean War and the Vietnam War with the ring around
correct.
China. Yeah,
that's correct. Of which is going to be challenged more and more in the years to come. Let's just put it like that. So,
that's probably over, because what was that article? You guys might have it already, where Trump wants China to come in and actually police the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, that's been discussed for quite some time. China would eventually go in there and try to assert itself, because they want to protect those oil shipments coming in, and plus they have their mercantile goods going through the region as well.
Yeah, what Trump was just saying that, well, number one, I'm sure you read it, that Trump said that the United States wants to get out of the business of protecting the strait, and they want China to come in and do it instead. And that was over the last couple of days, especially right after the downing of the drone.
Yeah.
Hey, Dr. Phoenix, you have anything you want to add? Can you hear us, Dr. Phoenix?
Yeah, I can hear you, gentlemen. How's everyone doing tonight?
Doing very well. How are we doing?
Good.
You're former military. You have anything you want to add to that?
Essentially, yeah. So I was actually deployed to Iraq in the early mid 2000s, and one of the initial things they tried to do prior to the initial invasion back in '03 was that when they were formulating the plans to invade Iraq, they initially were going to invade from the northern part of Iraq through Kurdistan, which is bordered by Turkey, obviously, because gentlemen know that there's a major Air Force base in Turkey, Fort Incirlik. And so, but again, that was shot down by the Turkish because of a lot of the issues. Yeah, a lot of it was the issues in that too. A lot of it was just some of the politicking that was happening with the Kurds in northern Iraq. But ultimately, they made the decision to go into Iraq from the south, and also do sort of an airborne invasion, if you will. And a lot of that was predicated on the fact that simply that, anyone knows the history of Iraq, know that Iraq was put into power by the U.S. government back in the 60s. And so, I mean, again, when they invaded Iraq, that actually shifted the balance of power from Russia to the U.S., and ultimately it essentially divided the entire region for the most part. And so again, you had the Iranians initially were okay with it, because obviously, you know, there's always been that bad blood between Iraq and Iran and all of that.
They weren't
But
they weren't okay with it. The thing is, they were threatened with
yeah,
invasion, so they tried to make peace, but they didn't take them off the list.
yeah, no. I mean, they, you know, they've been scratching to get their, you know, get their vengeance on Iraq. But again, the major component of that was that
Hmm.
anyone familiar with what happened in Iraq, essentially the U.S. government came in, disbanded the Republican National Guard.
Hmm.
That was Saddam forces, and then they replaced it with their form of government. And so pretty much all of the politicians you see in place now within Iraq that control Iraq from pretty much top to bottom now
Hmm.
are they've essentially been puppeteers. And I mean they essentially tried to break free, but you know the U.S. is never leaving Iraq. I mean, even to this day, I mean, there's a significant amount of forces in Iraq, obviously, because the U.S. greatest gift to Iraq was the world's largest embassy sent in the Green Zone.
Hmm.
So, so again, I mean, as it relates to Russia, I mean, I even did a little. There was a brief tour that I did with some guys when we went to we were in oh my God, what's the country? Is in Africa, Tanzania. Went to Tanzania and we did some training there. But I mean, again, when you go to the Horn of Africa, I mean, the Russians have always had a foothold there. And whether you go into Somalia, Ethiopia, even parts of Eritrea, I mean, the Russians have been a constant supplier of arms and black market weapons to that part of Africa. And for the most part, most of these countries within the Arabian Peninsula and the and what we would consider sort of the Middle East, if you will. So I mean, I mean, Russia has just always been a natural player in the region. It's just that their power waned in the 2000s, and now you just kind of see that resurgence simply because of the U.S.'s foothold on the region has just been waning. Part of it is you just you see America going back to sort of this almost isolationist type of government that we saw prior to the beginning of World War II. So not just about that.
Yeah, it seems like Russia's classically played that, you know, that kind of antagonistic role to the United States around the world, and you know, and we certainly understand why they did that. I think it's been very interesting as you look at this development over the last 40 years or 50 years, especially since the since the 60s and I would say, you know, our rather aggressive movements into Southeast Asia and so forth, and how the Russians were kind of playing a counter to that. I all of this is still evolving. I think this is still an evolution, and I think, you know, even with the change of the Russian government to move to where it is right now, it's put them in a position where they have or I think much of this kind of somewhat of their long term strategy has been somewhat successful, even with some of the critical mistakes that they made in Afghanistan, and getting out, and then kind of retooling their game in the Middle East.
In the
I,
Soviets in
I,
Afghanistan, guess what they're out of?
Go
Money.
ahead. Yeah,
They're out
money.
of money.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the difference between now in the 80s?
Well, what's the big difference between now and the 80s?
Mm-hmm.
You know, as far as the you said with respect to the Russians or with respect to
With respect to the
Afghanistan?
Russians, yeah, respect to the Russians. What's the difference?
They changed their government. They've got
Chinese
and China.
money.
Yeah. Anyway, well, they have Chinese money. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's big. Yeah.
Wars. You can't fight. You can't fight wars on ambition.
Yeah, and that's why they got out of it. They knew that was a
Mm-hmm.
bad conflict. They understood that conflict was bad. It
They
hurt
were
them terribly.
they're out of money. Why do you think
Yeah,
that? Well, most of the troops are out of Middle East from the United States.
yeah, well,
They're out of money.
that's money as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Russians pulled back. They saw that this wasn't working, and
Mm-hmm.
they took another another look at this thing, and are dealing with this thing from a more practical standpoint. And I
It's
think, and that's our issue. You know, we're not, you know, we're trying to be more practical. I mean, Obama, and then we're looking at that and saw that this was something we couldn't keep pressing out there like that.
basically, if you look at the conflict right now, all you got to do, especially in the Middle East, all you got to do is look at the SCO. Okay, what is the
Yeah,
difference
we talk.
between What's the difference between SEO taking over the whole region right now? Basically, it's basically what two things. Well, basically two things. Really, one thing, which is Iraq. Supposed to be Syria was supposed to be the fire break, but that didn't work out because the Russians stepped in. So the only thing between the Russians taking over the whole, basically the whole Middle East, is basically what's left in Iraq.
I think that's already been established though, that the president of Iraq, or the prime minister of Iraq, has invited the Russians in.
And the Iranian hand is in there very heavy because they've been kind of running Iraq to a large extent since we kicked Saddam and his people out.
Well, what do you expect them to do? You basically blasted their country for the last 20 some odd years. Are they going to pick you?
He ain't gonna pick you.
Ain't gonna pick you. So it's just, well, that's how come the United States really doesn't want to leave. Basically, they know it's gonna happen. If they leave, they know it's gonna happen. It's a wrap.
Yeah, 50% of Iraqi power comes out of Iran. So Iran is paying for electricity and water and gas inside Iraq. So they have a vested interest in maintaining that place because they paid in blood for it. You know, they lost a lot of soldiers.
And evidently Trump is not willing to step on that because he allowed the waiver for that energy to actually go through. So he allowed a sanctions waiver for Iraq to get energy from Iran.
Let me get to this next article. All right, this one is from PressTV.com. Russia says many countries standing by Iran in case of any U.S. crazy action against Tehran. Senior Russian diplomat says Iran will not be alone if the United States takes an absolutely crazy act against the Islamic Republic amid rising tension between Tehran and Washington. Iran will never be alone if, God forbid, the U.S. ever takes absolutely crazy and irresponsible actions against it. Russian presidential envoy to Afghanistan, Zamir Kubelov, told reporters in Moscow on Wednesday, Bloomberg reported. Not only Russia, but many countries sympathize with Iran, he added. Kubelov said there is a possibility of an armed confrontation between Tehran and Washington, but added that the conflict can still be ironed out using diplomacy. I really want to believe that there will be no war. When we say war, we sometimes mean short-term conflicts, unfortunately, and this cannot be ruled out because tensions are running high, the diplomat explained. But this does not mean that it is inevitable. It is still possible to return to a conventional political process, and Russia is doing its best to make this happen. Kubelov also denounced as absolutely insulting recent U.S. sanctions against the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Separately, on Wednesday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow will try to persuade the U.S. and Iran to start dialogue, but reminded Washington that talks and sanctions could not go together. Russia has slammed the U.S. efforts to raise pressure on Iran, reiterating Moscow will stand by Tehran in the face of Washington's threats and sanctions. Tensions have spiked in the Persian Gulf since May, when the administration of the U.S. President Donald Trump reinstated the sanctions against Iran that had been lifted under a 2015 multilateral nuclear deal with Iran a year after the U.S. unilaterally walked away from the agreement officially known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. Since then, a spat of suspicious attacks on oil tankers near the strategic Strait of Hormuz and the recent downing of a U.S. spy drone that had intruded into Iran's southern skies have convulsed the region and fomented tensions. The U.S. has blamed tanker attacks on Iran, which denies involvement. Washington also claims that the U.S. RQ-4A Global Hawk unmanned surveillance drone shot down by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps was flying over international waters and had not violated the Iranian airspace. However, the GPS coordinates released by Iran put the drone 8 miles off the country's coast, inside the 12 nautical miles from the shore, which is Iran's territorial waters. Russian President Vladimir Putin's top security aide said on Tuesday that Moscow has military intelligence indicating that the U.S. spy drone was in fact intruding into Iranian airspace, despite Washington's claims to the contrary. I have information from the Defense Ministry of the Russian Federation that this drone was in Iranian airspace. Head of Russia's Security Council, Nikolai Prostrev, said at a briefing for journalists in Jerusalem, Al-Quds. A few days after Iran's downing of the drone, the White House introduced new sanctions that targeted Ayatollah Khamenei and the senior commanders of Navy, Aerospace, and Ground Forces of the IRGC. Washington is also set to slap bans on Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, who is seen as the architect of the JCPOA. This comes as Putin and Trump will have an hour-long meeting on the sidelines of the G20 summit on June 28th in Osaka in Japan to discuss different issues, including Tehran-Washington tensions, a Kremlin aide said on Wednesday. Oh, man. We've been talking about this here for quite some time, but, you knew Russia was going to step in and they're not going to back down. So.
Why toss in a winning hand?
Mm-hmm. They also showed, this was some months ago, but actually last year, that Russia flew their strategic bombers into Iranian airspace, landed, refueled, and then took off and bombed Syria all in one swoop. So they were demonstrating to the United States that if you think about coming in here, this is what you're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, which is a very serious opposition, of which I don't think we have a very good answer to. BGS, what do you
well,
say?
In 2006, Russia and China actually told United States to keep its hands off of Iran.
That's right. Sure did.
That's 13 years ago. Nothing's changed. Nothing has changed. So basically, with the drone, in fact, they actually interviewed the I think the guy over the missile defense. He said they shot down a drone, but there was also a manned plane that had like 35 crew members on it. It was actually right beside it. They chose not to shoot it. They chose not to shoot it down. So basically, this is a warning shot. They shot down a drone and decided not to provoke a war by not shooting down the plane with the people in it.
Yeah,
they flew the drone right next to the actual plane. I think it was only a few hundred feet or something like that, right next to it. So the point that I'm making here is that Iran has accurate missiles, 99% dead accurate missiles that can take out just about any of these planes that they put up there if they so need to take them out. So going into Iran would be a suicide mission for any country, including Israel. If you think about going in to bomb them, you're going to lose all your planes going in there.
Well, that's the warning primarily to Israel. Because
it's a warning.
If we do look to strike, it's not going to be American aircraft coming in there first. It'll be Israeli, as they have tried to do in the past, especially in Syria and so forth. So that's who would be coming.
They came extremely close because I don't know if it was Trump. I don't know if it was the generals actually calling for an actual missile strike inside Iran right after that.
Yeah, they should. And the generals shut them down. They were like, "Nah, man, ain't happening."
I don't know who in the you never know who in the room was actually calling for it, but they did announce. I guess they announced it publicly to let Iran know that we're going to back down.
Yeah,
they said it was Bolton. They said it was John Bolton that was pushing for it.
Man, fucking moron.
So they're determining right now whether or not Trump is going to get rid of Bolton before the end of the year, because if he's worried that Bolton may pull a move that may bring him into a conflict before the election or before the campaign begins, and that can destroy his his second term.
If you put a missile strike on Iran, the last thing you need to worry about is an election.
Yeah, because what you're talking about is global nuclear war. That's ultimately what we're talking about.
We really talk. Basically, you had your damn near your Cuban Missile Crisis right there.
Sure did. Sure did. I agree with that. I mean, my brother we're talking about that just the other day, and we were speaking on that immediately. We were saying, hey, if you do that, this is what we're getting into, and you'll be in you will be in a massive conflagration.
And then right after that, Trump basically invites China in to help protect the strait. And then the next thing you know, you got Cuba going. I mean, not Cuba, but Russia going to Cuba, but also going back to Venezuela to bring more arms and personnel.
Bring more arms, and then you're talking about troops really mobilizations going from the South America. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Don't forget that. Don't forget that Russia has its hypersonic missiles that are ready to deploy in January of 2020. This is coming from Putin a couple months ago, that they'll be ready by January of 2020.
The thing is, what I don't understand, and this is just a side of being a side of a military, and you probably can chime in on this in the gone.
Yeah.
Okay, your country's getting ready to go into a freaking recession.
What?
Or if it's not already in it, right? Okay, you basically your Fed is getting ready to cut interest rates. The only way you cut interest rates is because your country's in a recession, right?
You were looking at this properly. That's how I say it.
So basically, your yield curve is inverted. Okay, your currency's taking a hit. Gold is up. Bitcoin shot up just on the news. And then you want to actually start a conflict in the Strait of Hormuz, the targeting tanker. You know what's going to happen to oil and gas if you do that?
It's ridiculous.
The price of gallon of gas is going to go up to if you do that?
You'll be at $7-8 a gallon.
At least. That's if you're lucky.
I mean, and in certain other areas of the country, even more than that, you will drop the economy. The economy will fall into the toilet.
When they shot that drone down, I paid $4.10 for gas that night. Dr. Phoenix, you have anything you want to add?
I mean, essentially, if you go back about 10, 12 years ago, when you had the gas prices that shot up to about $5, $6. I wasn't, like I said, I'm from Chicago, so in Chicago, I think gas there, if you buying premium, it was like $6. So we would see something very similar to, actually even worse than what we saw.
It would be worse because I remember when it shot up, and my old think tank was actually talking about it, right? And so because we couldn't understand, because remember that the diesel prices are higher than actually gasoline prices.
Yes.
Yeah, because that never happens. Okay, that never happens. On the commercial market, that never happens. So there had to be a special circumstances for diesel prices that shoot up like that, right? And the reason is guess what China was building for? The 2008 Olympics. So they had all this construction, all these cranes, all these tractors sucking up all the diesel and driving the price up. And as soon as it's like a month before the Olympics went off, guess what happened? Prices did what? Dropped.
So,
but the economy damn near shut down because of that.
I'm telling you, you start hitting $7-8 a gallon, you finish.
Yeah,
it's done. People won't even be able to drive around.
We're not including. We're not even talking about when diesel goes up and the truckers have to get goods from one place to another.
Then you talk about a tremendous increase in the price of just all your goods, food especially.
You talk about that 30% price increase in the price of food during a recession.
Yeah, and when you start talking about that, now we're talking about your essentials. You start getting to your essentials, you start hitting that, you start hitting at the very base root of the game, and if you want to have war, and this is the kind of war you want to have, that's exactly how you have to strike people up for that.
I paid $2. I paid $2.25.
You want to get it.
Go ahead.
I paid $2.25 for avocado just for one. When that popped off last week. So, and I went last month. I paid $1.70, $1.72 for one avocado. So that's where we're going right now.
Yeah. I noticed when I went into the market, you see a lot more local produce in the market rather than produce from like Mexico or Latin America, something like that. So evidently, this is affecting fuel prices, because as fuel prices go up, it gets more expensive to ship the stuff in.
Yeah.
Look at the price of Doritos. A bag of Doritos used to be 99 cents. Now you got to cough up $2 per bag now, and that's some miles to be fun.
That's an obscenity under
So
the eye.
wait a minute. So we're gonna go by the Dorito scale of inflation. Huh?
Oh yeah. If it smells like feet, you know it's good.
That's what I call. That's a nice fundamental analytic I would like to use as well. The price of Doritos.
Price of Doritos.
All right, let me get to the next article. Yeah, let me get to this next article. This one is from foreignaffairs.com. What a war with Iran would look like. Neither side wants a fight, but that doesn't eliminate the danger. Tensions between Iran and the United States are at the highest point in years. The 2015 Iran nuclear agreement is teetering. The Trump administration is using sanctions to strangle the Iranian economy, and in May deployed an aircraft carrier, a missile defense battery, and 4 bombers to the Middle East. Washington has evacuated non-essential personnel from its embassy in Baghdad, citing intelligence suggesting that Iran is increasingly willing to hit U.S. targets through its military proxies abroad. The United States also stated that Iran almost certainly perpetuated the recent damage to oil tankers flagged by Saudi Arabia, Norway, and the United Arab Emirates, and claimed that Iran had temporarily loaded missiles onto small boats in the Persian Gulf. In early May, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton publicly threatened to in response to any Iranian attacks, whether by proxy, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, or regular Iranian forces. I mentioned that earlier, that John Bolton was the guy that wanted to go in, and Trump told him, get lost. The good news is that the situation is not as bad as it appears. None of the players, with the possible exception of Bolton, seem to really want a war. Iran's military strategy is to keep tensions at a low boil and avoid a direct confrontation with the United States. Washington struck a tough public posture with its recent troop deployment, but the move was neither consequential nor terribly unusual. If the United States were truly preparing for a war, the flow of military assets into the region would be much more dramatic. Bad news is that a war could still happen, even if neither side wants to fight. A miscalculation, missed signals, and the logic of escalation could conspire to turn even a minor clash into a regional configuration.
All right. I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
With devastating effects for Iran, the United States, and the Middle East, a conflict will most likely start with a small, deniable attack. This is behind a paywall, but I think we get the gist of the article.
I'll send you the article because I have
okay.
I have a subscription with Foreign Affairs.
This is just my quick question. This is to you guys, to the panel, BGS, Dr. Phoenix, and you guys. All right, I already have my reasonings, but what is all the saber rattling about?
You know what it's about. Remember I told you about the Monroe Doctrine?
Oh yeah, of course.
Didn't I tell you they were going to try? They're going to try to they're trying to trade one piece for another. They want you out. They want you. If I can't attack you in Venezuela, it's too expensive. I'm gonna, you threaten my peace. Guess what? I'm gonna threaten your peace. You threaten my king, I'm gonna threaten your king. So I'm gonna go right next to one of your most valuable pieces, which is Iran, and park my my ships and my B-52s right there to threaten it, to encourage you to leave Venezuela. And they walked right up to the edge. They never intended a war with Iran, to my knowledge. They walked right up to the edge, and they got too close. They thought they were going to fly a drone over Iran. Iran wasn't going to hit it. Iran shot it down and said, "Okay, now what? Basically, what are you going to do?"
And that's one of the most advanced drones that they have, which is $110 billion. Very interesting that they spent that much money on a drone, but not, put the emphasis behind other technologies.
They put a drone and people in the way. Which means you trying to stoke a war. But the thing is, nobody else wants it. Everybody else knows what's at stake because nobody else followed you.
You're right.
I agree. I mean, the U.S. has a history of kind of doing these very subtle acts of provocation,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially Iran called it bluff. And Russia has been doing this political posturing for the past decade or so in that region. I mean, again, the U.S. didn't make itself any allies by going into Iraq and Afghanistan. So, um, I mean, this was just a natural result of that. Was that eventually Russia was going to be able to tilt the balance of power back into their favor, and now this is the result.
Yeah, but basically, they've already tilted the balance of power back in their favor. This is basically them showing you who. Basically, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. They're showing you who's boss. Going into
Yeah, I agree.
Venezuela,
I
going
agree.
into Venezuela in your in your quote unquote competitor's backyard and holding it and daring you to do something. That's pretty goddamn bold, in my opinion.
No, no, it's a very gutsy move. I
But
mean,
gutsy move.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey,
Again, I mean,
you've been in the military. You know about the Monroe Doctrine.
yeah, yeah. No, it's very. I mean, again, I mean, the military. This has always been the military's MO. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this has always been foreign policy for the U.S. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so again, I mean, this is how they've always operated in any region they've gone
Mm-hmm.
to, whether it is whether it is Central Latin America or the Middle East. I mean, this is how the U.S. has always operated, and again. These are
Yeah.
countries too that have traditionally always had support in the background from Russia. So what we're seeing now is just a natural result of people saying, "Well, we kind of just tired of the U.S.'s shit," you know, let it be.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, yeah, they lost. Yes, lost a lot of credibility by allowing the 2008 financial crisis to actually go down.
Oh, that was a game changer.
It was a
So let's
game
talk.
I
changer
mean, I
because
agree.
yeah,
I agree.
people basically threw in the towel on the U.S. because as long as people are making money and things are stable, they were willing to put up with the U.S.'s shit. But
I mean,
once you got caught cheating, it's like, you know what, we we need to slowly but surely find a new player to actually lead
and
the
and
world.
BGS makes a whole point because BGS, when we get into that conversation, we won't get into that here today.
No.
But when we start to talk about gold, dollars, and power,
Mm-hmm.
this starts to play deeply into that as well,
Mm-hmm.
and how that politically and economically has
Mm-hmm.
changed a lot of the topography of the earth right now,
Mm-hmm.
and um, we start to look at China and Russia. They start putting together their own economic system and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
This is a
um,
whole new game we got coming on.
It's a whole new
yeah,
game. In fact,
We'll get into that in
there's a
more
couple of
detail.
articles. I think
Yeah.
there's one article I marked up by Henry C.K. Lou. I just need to put it up, put it up in video form because he was talking about China and the rest of the world getting off the dollar.
Yep.
And I think it's 2007, 2008.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Aware of that. Yeah.
you've seen a lot of countries over the last decade or so that have been posturing and attempting to make that move to get rid of the dependency on the U.S. dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in, trade. Being that oil is traded in U.S. dollars and all of that. But I
Mm-hmm.
will say this much is that don't count out some of the very staunch allies of the U.S. So
Like
again,
whom?
we keep in mind the U.S.
Like
still
whom?
has Australia in its corner. Still, I mean, Australia was a major. I mean, I'm telling you guys right now, Australia and Estonia were major players
I know why.
Yeah.
I know why BGS would laugh. I know.
Yeah,
Australia,
It's the
Australia
Five
has to,
Eyes.
they're right next to China. They're worried about their own
yeah,
behind.
I know. I actually went to school in Australia, so
So
I spent about
okay,
3 years there, so
and
I know what's going on there.
and Australia is going to do what?
I mean, right now, Australia has just basically been a nice place where the U.S. can store
Uh-huh.
a lot of its
Uh-huh.
weapons and ships and stuff. Because the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Navy docks in Western Australia. They
Mm-hmm.
actually used to have a program years ago where you can
Mm-hmm.
actually, if you were U.S. Army, you used to be able to switch over from the U.S. military into the Australian military.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, I mean, don't count them out.
Okay,
I will also,
if you add up all the people in Shanghai Cooperative, you know how many people that is?
Oh yeah, we're
The
talking billions.
population. We talk about damn near 5 billion people.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Again, I mean,
that is a defense pact. If you add up all the Western powers or white people, how many people are you going to come up with?
Europe only has 500 million people.
So I'm talking about, and that's including the foreigners that are in there that are not white.
no, I agree. I'm just saying, but again, I mean, you've always had this axis of allies here that's been going on between Australia, Canada.
Bottom line,
Yeah,
Australia is going to do what they need to do to survive.
yeah, of course. I mean, they're
That's
surrounded
what they're going to do.
on all sides
Australia,
by enemy. But
Australia
again,
relies a lot on importation,
That's
and
exactly correct.
their
yeah,
shipping lanes could be heavily affected by by those Asian states, and they don't
yeah,
really want that sort of conflict, because all they got to do is basically shut down their straits, and Australia will starve in a few months.
Australia that's the last thing they're looking to do is get live in
no,
something
no.
like this.
I do
Okay,
agree with you. I'm just saying,
and
don't count out the clandestine activities of it.
Oh yeah,
I want to
absolutely.
say, but
That's all.
the clandestine is one thing, okay?
Yeah,
overt.
Clandestine is one thing. Well, when it gets to an active war,
yeah. No, when we
how much
consider
how much good are they going to do? It'd be better if you said Korea was an ally.
actually Korea to an extent has been an ally of the U.S. To an extent.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah,
Korea's.
let me get to this next article.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I mean,
Just
I
want
quite
to
agree with
Give me something I can work with.
that.
If you said Germany, I said okay, you might have a point.
But I wouldn't be worried about Germany though. I'll
Germany's
agree.
going east.
Yeah, I wouldn't be worried about Germany.
Germany has opened up
They got a lot of internal problems they got to deal with, so I wouldn't worry too much about
yeah, but they also have technology and industry, which is much more than Australia has.
That's
it.
a key part. And
Yeah,
you did have East Germany that was a part of the Soviet bloc and so forth.
which which was which is Prussia,
Which is
which I find out later, which actually shocked me when I was reading the intro to Iron Kingdom, right? And Winston Churchill sent Prussia, which is East Germany, to Russia because he thought
yeah.
the Russians was going to exact revenge on East Germany or Prussia, and he didn't.
Well, that was part of the whole Iron Curtain speech and all that game. That gets into some other stuff, but that's pretty accurate. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike. But good stuff there, guys. Good stuff.
All right, let me get to this next article. All right, this one is from Business Insider. Trump is giving up on regime change in Venezuela because it's complicated and he got bored. He's bored.
Go ahead. I'm gonna mute myself.
This guy's a fucking moron. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just go ahead.
President Donald Trump is losing interest in Venezuela after a bid to remove President Nicolas Maduro failed, officials told the Washington Post. In April, U.S.-backed bid by the Venezuelan opposition to remove Maduro failed when senior Venezuelan government and military officials reneged on promises to switch sides and instead stood by the president. I gotta mute up Dr. Phoenix there for a second. According to U.S. officials who spoke with the Post, Trump had viewed the prospect of a U.S.-backed toppling of Maduro as an easy win at the time when other foreign policy initiatives had stalled. A former administration official who spoke on the condition of anonymity told the publication that Trump had always thought Venezuela as low-hanging fruit on which he could get a win, and told it as a major foreign policy victory. 5 or 6 months later, it's not coming together, the official said. Current and former officials told the Post that Trump had chewed out National Security Advisor John Bolton and Carone, the Latin America policy director, because they got played by both the U.S.-backed opposition leader Juan Guaido and Maduro regime figures, who said they supported ousting Maduro. In January, when Guaido declared himself interim president of Venezuela and urged the military to turn against Maduro, the U.S. was quick to declare its support, imposing sanctions on Venezuelan government officials, sending food aid to the country, and pressing allies to recognize Guaido as the country's rightful leader. The Pentagon even refused to rule out using military force to aid in ousting Maduro, a move which experts told Business Insider could have resulted in the U.S. being bogged down in protracted conflict between conflict similar to those in Iraq and Afghanistan. The issues had largely fallen off Trump's Twitter feed, with the president last mentioning Venezuela on June 4th, when he said Russian forces had withdrawn from the country. Russia denied it discussed with the president withdrawing its defense personnel. So Trump is bored. I mean, can't play Angry Birds anymore. He's his fingers are tired from Twitter. He's a little bit bored right now.
Just so happens, huh?
Yeah, I mean, he's suing Omarosa. He's a little tired, man. I think he needs a nap.
Just so happened. Right after the drone fails. Just so happened. He's bored now.
Yep, now he's bored. Now
he's bored now. Okay.
Yeah.
Just so happened. Let me read this real quick because I pulled it up. Okay, about Germany. So this is from Churchill. It was the reason why Germany had turned from the path of peace and political modernity. The core of Germany is Prussia. Churchill told the British Parliament on the 21st of September 1943, there is a source of recurring pestilence. The excision of Prussia from the political map of Europe was the most symbolic necessity. Its history had become a nightmare that weighed upon the minds of the living. So basically, that's why they sent divided Germany, sent East Germany or Prussia east to Russia. It was a deal. They wanted Prussia gone.
The peace, yeah, that was certainly spoken about. Yes.
They want Prussia gone.
Yes, it was.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. Well, Dr. Phoenix, does this sound like a little bit of a backsliding or a little bit of a capitulation, or just a strategic withdrawal for the moment?
No, there's some capitulation. I believe it is. I mean, I don't think Trump really has any real answers to what's going on right now.
No, I don't think he's geopolitically savvy enough. I mean, we probably can run his foreign policy better than Bolton can, but
absolutely.
He really has no idea about what's going on in terms of foreign policy. I think he had made a couple of blunders on live TV. He had mistakenly said, Shia and Sunni, what's the difference? Aren't they all Muslim? Just one blunder after another.
I mean, this has always been John Bones' MO. I mean, this guy's been an idiot his entire career. I mean, this dude has been nothing but a war hawk pretty much his entire career. I mean, every time he's consulted, whether it was Reagan or George Bush Sr., I mean, that was always how it was. I mean, this dude was always been about, here, let's hit the nuclear option every single time.
And many people who know have not taken this guy that seriously. What bothers me about this president is the amount of buffoons he has around him. I mean, even if you're kind of stupid, you come off a little bit more intelligent, at least if you surround yourself with rather intelligent people. And this guy has surrounded himself with
that's a map of the Shanghai Cooperative and its various member states in different portions of observer and dialogue partners. That should tell you what's getting ready to go on if there's going to be any kind of war in the Middle East. If they do, if in fact Iran does actually call on the Shanghai Cooperative to actually come in on its aid, and the United States is how far away from home against that?
Wow.
I mean,
what are you talking about?
Just to get to Iraq alone, I think I took it was like an 18-hour flight.
So
you talking halfway around the globe.
You're gonna walk into that.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah, and
I
that
mean,
was even after we had a layover in Germany. So
it's
Well,
crazy.
don't forget that there is a China-Africa military pact. I mean, we covered that last
yes,
summer.
Yeah.
All 54 states have
Mm-hmm.
signed on to a military-to-military agreement that in case China gets attacked, African countries have to come to the defense of China.
So
Jamaica also signed a pact with them as well. So
mhm.
this has become a
I mean it makes sense given that Africa in recent years have made very um, very strong moves toward establishing China as a trading partner and a political ally. I mean, again, I mean, the U.S. has interfered in Africa for decades now. You know, you have AFRICOM and stuff like that. So, I mean, this is just only a natural reaction. I mean, nobody.
Yeah, well, they were there to play a destabilizing role in Africa, where
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
China's doing
agree.
something different. Yeah,
I mean, absolutely agreed. I mean, the U.S. has been there, and all they've done is just destabilize pretty much every part of Africa that they touched. So,
yeah. Unless Europe's willing to arm up and get involved.
I think Europe is a little too fragile right now as a whole.
yeah, you're right, because Steve Bannon is all over the place over there, gathering up
Yeah,
hundreds of thousands of white nationalists, for this
yeah,
other
they
push.
yeah, you
but
got Europe right now. You got parts of Europe. They're kind of teetering on part,
Europe
on
right now, let's talk
yeah,
about it's poor. It's not as
Hmm.
yeah.
wealthy. It's not very wealthy. Europe is
It never
poor.
has been.
They've been cut. They're cut off. They've been cut off. Or not cut off. They've been slowly but surely pulled off the tip.
They
Yeah,
have been pulled off the tip. They don't have. They
yeah.
don't. There's not a lot of industry. There's not a lot of money there. Not a lot of money. And I've seen that. It's kind of interesting because you have the apartment down in Brazil, and we surrender a lot to Europeans, and they're just not coming down to South America like that. They're not flush like that. They don't have the money.
Yeah.
Used to be the Italians and the Swedes and all of them. They be coming down all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the Europeans you have coming down now more, just some of the Germans, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not coming down as much. But you just see it's not the Europeans are not traveling that much. They're not that flush. They don't have that much money. So it's not like they have a lot of disposable dollars coming down. The British they're not as wealthy
Well,
as they were. Their economies have been rough. I mean, Italy and so forth. They're not flush like that. So to get involved in warfare and all that, nah, man, this is something that these guys are not really going to be able to withstand very
Yeah.
well, and they don't have any standing armies. They don't have the
Not even.
type of war material, hardware, and all that to really play that type of game.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Right.
they wouldn't have a whole lot of money because they're too busy
Yeah.
paying reparations to the goddamn Jews.
Well, that is true. I mean, Germany is what
Okay.
paying out billions a year to the Jews. I mean,
Mm.
Hmm.
But Germany by far is the most stable and strongest
yes.
economic power. On the European continent.
I mean, without a
You
doubt.
know.
I mean, without a
Um,
doubt. I mean, the
so
the euro would never have lasted this long without Germany.
and,
No.
and they have real industry there. They have
Yeah.
industry. Where you go to Italy and these other places, there's not a lot of industry. It's not big industry there.
Yeah.
Spain and so forth. There's just not
It's
big
all
industry.
tourism. All those Mediterranean countries,
Yeah, I
Italy,
mean,
Spain, they're just tourism. They're
you
just
just don't see it.
tourists.
Then we start going into Hungary and start going into some of the other countries, Romania and so forth. Come on, man. I mean,
Yeah,
it
there's a
should
lot of
happen,
poverty there. There's a lot of poverty. I mean,
and it
I
should
would
happen in
venture,
that.
yeah, and I would venture a guess that even African Americans are doing better than some of those Southern European countries.
Oh
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh
Many,
yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
yes. Oh
Oh yeah.
yes. Oh
Yeah.
yes. Oh
Yeah. A lot of
yes.
the
Oh yeah.
Southern European countries, basically the
Oh yeah.
population is drying up so fast. A lot of their villages are actually empty.
Yeah, and a lot of people and a lot of people are leaving. People are leaving,
Yeah.
and the
they're
Yeah.
and
selling off. They're
and
selling off
and the
their
birth
daughters.
rates are
You
down.
know,
And
it's
the birth
funny
rates are down.
because it's funny because when I was in Australia, there was an insane amount of Greeks in Australia,
Hmm.
and they were leaving the country wholesale because I mean, Greece has just been in the gutter
Greece is
now for
finished.
It's in the
yeah,
toilet. Yeah, they've been in the toilet for a long time.
They
yeah,
finished. The Greeks are
yeah,
finished.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I don't. I'm not even
they're
sure
picking
how they're even still standing.
So they're picking because they get money from the European Central Bank.
Central Bank. That's just keeping them alive.
As aid, and then the money that goes to Greece goes right out of their hands a few minutes later into the other bankers that want their debt to be paid. Greece doesn't really see any of that money. They sold off a lot of their assets in the same way that the United States came in and picked apart the Russians in the 90s, which is what brought Putin back to power. So you see a lot of their utility companies being privatized, as being bought out by oligarchs, and you're seeing they sold China these hovercrafts that were once a part of their navy. Now China has those hovercrafts used for landing capability. And they sold their ports. They basically sold their ports to China now. So Greece is so broke, man. They're looking to get out as soon as possible because they don't see any value in the euro. There is nothing beneficial about being in the EU right now, and they see themselves as being colonized by Germany and France and Britain.
Basically,
they are. Well, they are.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, they've always have been. I mean, ever since
they are.
Yeah, I mean, since the Germans invaded them, back in World War II. I mean, there's always been a sentiment with them. So, again, Germany. Yeah, I just think that.
I mean, absolutely. And you saw because they had a very strong right wing movement there for some years. They put in a fairly right wing government, and you had immense savagery running around there. I think that's where you saw, where foreigners, who were either black or wherever else, they, Arab or whatever, they were having a hard time in that place, because they were like, well, it's Greece for the Greeks and this, that, the third, and they ran a real tough game in a big austerity programs, and it did nothing. They kicked all those guys out, and then they went with a more left-leaning type of government to kind of balance, and really that's what kind of started bringing more money in, and they kind of got on the Euro titty, to be honest, and now they are a welfare state for all practical purposes. I hate to put it in those type of terms, but that's
they're a colonized state. They're a colonized state. All the southern European states are colonies of the major EU power. They can't wait to get away from it. That's why you see Italy and Poland getting together and attacking France and Germany and telling them, you should be paying reparations to the Africans now. And and France is like, oh, wait a second, let's have a conversation about this. Because they don't have any money to be paying anybody anything right now. You can see that's why you have the yellow vest protesting right now. France is going broke.
Going.
I wouldn't say going. I think they were. I think the only reason France is even standing today is because they're a member of the EU. Otherwise, France would have went under back in the 90s.
They remember the EU. Exactly. We saved them.
Basically,
Africa was trying to finish them off with Libya and so forth. They were getting ready to bring a currency to knock their asses out.
Basically, they get a quarter of their GDP from their 14 African colonies.
That's exactly correct. And that's why we attacked Libya.
And that's not even including basically them getting the resources like cocoa and other kind of stuff for cheap.
That's correct.
Caribbean as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to places like Morocco and Tunisia and Algeria and stuff like that, I mean, they've been paying out France, and you have Cameroon and some of these other places. I mean, they've been paying France for forever, and so I mean, outside of France joining the EU back in the 90s, I mean, they would have been gone under even with getting all those. Getting that money from those countries that they colonized. So.
Let me get to this next article. We only have so much time left. This one's from Foreign Affairs. Stuck in the middle with Iran. Under pressure, Baghdad might not choose the United States. In late May, Saudi Arabia hosted 3 separate summit meetings in Mecca in the hope of securing the region's unequivocal condemnation of Iranian activities in the Middle East. But whether at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, the Arab League, or the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, the Saudis, to their disappointment, found that not everyone shared their frame of mind about Iran. Dr. Phoenix, I'm gonna have to mute you real quick. One dissent particularly stood out. At the Arab League meeting, Iraqi President Barham Saleh implored the region's leaders to help sustain Iran's stability. Should the United States and its allies go to war with Iran, he maintained the conflict would have dangerous ramifications for Iraq and the entire Middle East. Saleh's statement was a reminder not just to the Saudis, but also to the United States that Baghdad is uniquely vulnerable when it comes to Iranian pressure. And make no mistake, Iran has big plans for Iraq. Although relations between the neighbors have had their ups and downs, Tehran has invested deeply in Iraq, both politically and economically, and these investments will only multiply in the short term. After all, U.S. sanctions on Iran have made Iraq an essential link in Iran's potential chain of commerce. How such plans play out will put the Iranians, the Iraqis, and the administration of the United States, of the U.S. President Donald Trump to test. The sanctions for the Trump administration imposed on Iran in late 2018 are the most severe the country has ever experienced. By all accounts, Tehran was not only surprised but caught flat-footed without a backup plan. The Iranians had banked on their European and Asian economic partners, saving them from President Trump's wrath by keeping trade channels open under the framework of the 2015 nuclear deal that Tehran signed with the United States and 5 other world powers. Instead, country after country opted to play it safe and avoid defying U.S. sanctions. The impact was swift and severe. Iran's trade with the 28 European Union members states dropped by nearly 83% from January 2018 to January 2019. Most notably, the Europeans stopped by buying Iran's oil, historically the lifeline of the country's trade with the continent. In need of a stopgap solution, Tehran turned to its immediate neighbors such as Turkey, Afghanistan, and Iraq as trade partners whose continued commerce could help offset the deep losses imposed by the U.S. sanctions. When it comes to circumventing sanctions, geography matters. According to the Trade Promotion Organization of Iran, an advocacy group connected to the Interior Ministry at the U.S., at this point, U.S. sanctions cannot become any tougher, and Iran's best option to focus on boosting trade with its immediate neighbors. The group urged political leaders in Tehran to reorient the country's non-oil trade away from distant customers in favor of those nearer to home. After all, among other problems U.S. sanctions have created for Iran's long-distance commerce, they have inhibited shipping and impeded Iran from financing and ensuring its commercial transactions, not to mention repatriating its export earnings. Iraq is politically close to Tehran and hence comparatively open to Iranian exports. The bureaucracy of trade functions more smoothly between linked economies, and transactions that don't use U.S. dollars don't need to pass through financial institutions that are forbidden to transact with Iranian entities. Iraq is also geographically closer to Iran, which helps Iran avoid the difficulties it encounters with more distant trade. Hence, the latest talk in Tehran suggests making immediate neighbors the country's top economic priority, since engaging with them is simply that much less complicated than with others. In the case of Iraq, there is more to Iran's relationship than proximity. The Iranians have real influence over Baghdad and can garner support from officials at the highest level, as evidenced by President Saleh's comments at the Arab League meeting. Strong economic ties back this political leverage. In the last decade, Iraq has become Iran's biggest export market for non-oil goods. Bilateral trade totals about $12 billion a year. And Tehran and Baghdad want to boost this to $20 billion. Not everything goes Iran's way, though. According to Iranian oil minister Bajan Zaghni, Iraq won't do anything to help Iran circumvent U.S. sanctions if it means risking American retaliation. For months, the Iraqis refused to pay Iran for natural gas, citing U.S. sanctions as the obstacle. The Iraqis are also refusing to do any joint oil exploration and development in the border areas where Tehran has offered to work on shared fields. Nor are they above a bit of optimism when it comes to oil exports, as Iran's oil exports have fallen from about 2.5 million barrels per day a year ago to around 1 million now. Baghdad has increased its own oil exports by 250,000 barrels a day to compensate much to Iran's charging. This article, I think, is actually inaccurate. Iran is down to 300,000 barrels a day now. I'm not going to read this whole thing because I think the gist of this is that if there is a conflict, Iraq is not going to take U.S. side. They have no interest in that. You just destroyed our country, so why would we help you? Destroy somebody else's country, especially our neighbor who supplies us with energy and non-energy goods. You would have to be an idiot in the Trump administration to believe that the Iraqi government is going to back you up in this sort of conflict.
It makes good press. If they believe Europe is actually going to get involved in it, that makes good press.
The thought of Europe getting involved is ridiculous. Europe is getting a lot of oil and resources from Iran. That's one of the worst things that can happen with them. They're not going to be a part of this. So I have to totally agree with BGS on that.
You can't get your own people excited about it. The American people are tired of this crap, man. Nobody's going to escalate into a theater war. You know how many people have to be called up for a theater war of this magnitude? Just Iran alone, you know how many people are going to have to get called up just for this? Let alone what happens if China and Russia and India decide to actually join in. You talk about have to call up at least 1 million people, 1 million men. Does the United States have the stomach for this kind of thing, or want to pay for this kind of war?
Exactly, and what kind of time frame are we talking about in this kind of conflagration? This ain't going to be over in a week or two.
I think just in general mentioning the word Iraq just brings back just people get PTSD from it, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. So, Colin Powell said you should have been out of Iraq no later than 2006, and we're still there.
Yeah.
The U.S. will never leave Iraq. I mean, they've been trying to turn Iraq into a Germany now, and it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
They will leave. They just won't leave voluntarily.
Right.
Why would they try to turn it? Why would they try to turn it into Germany? I mean, what did they plan on bringing instead of bratwurst? They have falafel or something?
Well, no. The part of the thing is just the geostrategic positioning of Iraq. I mean, it's a very important place globally. I mean, again, you have access to pretty much Asia. You from Iraq and Afghanistan alone, you can strike at any major Asian country within a 6 to 8 hour period. That's perfect range for your B-52s.
But we took out Saddam's government and all the governments out of there and decided we were going to run this thing on our own. We gave it to Iran. That's what we did. So we blew that in 2004.
You don't have the money to run it.
They don't have the money.
Yeah.
You had the money to run it.
I don't. People don't understand just exactly how badly Iraq got destroyed over the past almost 2 decades. When I was there,
you got to remember, it started in 90. It started in 91.
I mean, it started with the sanctions under Madeleine Albright.
We're talking about almost 3 decades now.
Yeah. So I mean, again, when I went there, I mean, at that time the U.S. controlled Iraq's power. In fact, when I was there, I mean, Iraqi citizens only had power for about 6 hours out of the day. The U.S. completely controlled everything. in that country. I mean, they controlled the power, the water, everything, and slowly they got that back. But again, you know, they Iraq got destroyed. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And I mean, and they're still recovering to this day. So I mean, good, close allies. I mean, close neighbors make good allies. So again, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Turn around, did the same thing to Libya and Syria.
And the thing is, before Gaddafi got killed, he was at the Arab League and he had told them that what happened to Saddam could happen to any one of us. Little did he know that he was going to be the next one to have his head chopped off.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I mean, we saw. I mean, I remember I was in Iraq when Saddam was hung, and it was the craziest thing ever because the video, if you guys remember, that video got leaked, and and everybody just saw this real nasty hanging with them in the gallows. But again, I mean, people have these images. People have images of Abu Ghraib. Again, I was there doing that as well. And so, I mean, people have all these images that were associated with the U.S. being in Iraq. I mean, who will ever forget that image, that big picture that came out with the soldiers in Abu Ghraib, and you just see all these naked Iraqi males, and you just see these soldiers just standing over them. I mean, people will never forget that. I mean, it is a very infamous image, and people will never forget the images of children being killed. So again,
and even female soldiers pointing at Arab men's dicks.
Yeah,
I mean, that shit was ill.
I mean, people will never. Ill. I mean, people will. They will never forget that transgression.
Ill. That was ill.
Do you think the American public has the fortitude for a major war?
No, I don't think so. No, I mean,
I think the right type of conflict, but this ain't it.
Yeah, I think just even saying the name Iraq is problematic. Period.
Let me jump to this next article. This one is from Stratfor. Russia, Moscow backs Iranian version of drone events at meeting with Israel and U.S. officials. During a meeting with the U.S. and Israeli national security advisors in Jerusalem on June 25th, Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev said Russia has intelligence that the U.S. drone shot down by Iran was in Iranian airspace, a point Iran has argued and the United States has denied. Haaretz reported U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, meanwhile, emphasized that Iran should not interpret U.S. restraint in its response to the drone's downing as a sign of weakness. Patrusev's statement is another notable display of Russian diplomatic support for Iran amid growing U.S. efforts to isolate the Islamic Republic. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said June 24th that Russia would take steps to counter any new sanctions imposed by the United States on Iran. And a Russian official has now sought to rebut the evidence given by the United States to make the case for more sanctions. Moscow will try to use Washington's heightened concern with Tehran to push for concessions from the United States in other areas, such as sanctions, Ukraine, and arms control. In doing so, Moscow would strategically increase its support for Iran in the coming weeks in an effort to gain more leverage for use against Washington in negotiations. So Russia seems to be backing Tehran all the way. So you have Iraq, who just openly, basically declared that they will be backing up Iran, and then you have Russia coming out. China has warned against attacking Iran. Some of your most strategic powers are basically saying hands off Iran. Yeah. Venezuela has has even Maduro has stuck his foot in the water as well.
Well, they forced him to pick a side. That's what they did. They forced him to pick a side. That's what happened. So you basically pushed you pushed Venezuela into a point where they wanted to stay neutral, but guess what you did? Years of sanction, you forced them to pick a side, so they picked one.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I just think in general, I mean, Iraq has dominated the headlines,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for almost 2 decades, at least as it pertains to the U.S.'s active war in Iraq, you know, and so again, people don't forget that, and again, you know, people remember everything that happened. So what you're saying now is that yeah, people are picking sides, and okay, and the U.S. is obviously going to lose in this one.
If they decide to fight, they've been talking about this for a long time. Do you think the U.S. is actually going to actually start a shooting war?
I don't think so.
Mm.
I think one, you don't have the stomach for it,
Mm-hmm.
and two, understand a lot of the refugees that came into this country over the last decade were Iraqis and Syrians. They are the vast majority of refugees who came into this country. So
Mm-hmm.
again, you sort of have this issue where you have a lot of folks who are in this country who would be considered residents or even citizens now, that
Mm-hmm.
they still have family back in those countries.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean that could be problematic, but again, you know, they are a smaller population. But I just don't think in general the public, even as much support as Donald Trump still has, you
Mm-hmm.
know, publicly, but I just don't think when it comes to an act of war, the public will be down for that.
All right,
Agreed.
let me get to this next article. Let me get to this next article. All right, this one is from Yahoo Finance, or Yahoo News, sorry. India warships deployed to strategic Gulf waters, Navy. India has sent warships and stepped up aerial surveillance in the strategic Gulf waters. Uh, the press trust of India reported on Thursday, with global tensions rising in the region. So, um, India is basically monitoring those ships that are carrying oil to back to New Delhi. So they're looking at this type of stuff and they're saying, um, if you cut off our energy supply, we will respond to that. The question is, who's going to cut off that energy supply?
No, nobody yet, unless it gets to be desperate times. I think if it gets beyond saber rattling, which is all I think that's going on now, it's
Mm.
basically saber rattling. We've come mighty close, but I think that cooler heads will prevail. Nobody wants to break up, stop doing business.
Yeah, I think that's the key. It's economics is kind of driving this. And, you know, war would definitely get big in the way of that. So
Mm.
I would absolutely totally agree.
I 100% agree with that as well.
Yeah.
All right, let me get to this last article. All right, this one is from the New York Post. Iran it is prepared for war after shooting down U.S. drone. Hours after Iran's Revolutionary Guard shot down an American drone, its commander warned Thursday that the Islamic Republic is totally ready and prepared for war. Major General Hosni Salami said that the drone shootdown served as a warning to the United States that the Iranian military is capable of countering any foreign aggression, according to CNN, which cited the Iranian Tasnim news agency. The downing of the American drone is an open, clear, and categorical message, which is the defenders of the borders of Iran will decisively deal with any foreign aggression, Salami said. This is the way the Iranian nation deals with its enemies. Salami said that uh, Salami added that Iran does not want war with any country, but we are completely and totally ready and prepared for war. Meanwhile, the Revolutionary Guard said the U.S. drone had masked its identification equipment after it was launched. CNN reported, quoting Iran's Fars news agency, The statement said the RQ-4 Global Hawk drone flew from the Strait of Hormuz towards Chabawa. The Revolutionary Guard said the drone was breaking all aerospace rules and hiding its identification, which is against all aviation rules. The IRGC statement added, while returning to the western Hormuz Straits region, the drone violated Iran's airspace and engaged in information gathering and spying at 4:05 a.m. local time while the violating airplane was over Iran's territory. It was shot down by IRGC. Let me see if I can play this video. It figures that it comes with a commercial.
Of course it does.
Ministry spokesperson Abbas Mousavi was quoted by the semi-official Tasnim news agency as saying that saying that Iran cannot condone the illegal trespassing and invading of the country's skies by any kind of foreign object. He added, "We strongly condemn this kind of aggressive and proactive action. We warn against any violation of Iran's airspace by foreign flying objects and declare that violators are responsible for the consequences of their actions." I want to see if I can find that video where Iran shot their surface-to-surface missile from Iran into the deepest sides of Syria as a response. So I think it was see if I can find it real quick. Here it is right here.
Where were they aiming at?
Allegedly terrorists of the Kurds. Supposedly the Kurds had launched an attack against them. That's allegedly what happened. Basically, they took old Soviet missiles and converted them and modified them with these cheap computers that you could buy off the shelf. And I think they were old SA-2 missiles, and basically modified them to be surface-to-surface missiles. They hit all of their targets, 99% accurate.
Well, GPSs are cheap now.
Yeah,
I think that might be a lot more than GPS because
That's all you really need. You don't really need much more than GPS and a locator. Well, GPS used to be expensive when the first cruise missiles actually came out. They were really expensive, but now since the advent of smartphones, they're cheap. And basically, for that to actually hit an identified target, all you need is a coordinate and be able to aim the missile toward a coordinate. And the GPS is what accurate within what, like 3 meters.
yeah.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
It was getting a lot cheaper. I remember back I think during the was it the Falklands War, one of the wars where a missile was fired and took out a ship that was
the Exocet, yeah.
That was, the missile was less than $1 million, and it just took out a whole warship.
Yeah,
and it had a whole GPS setting on that as well.
Yeah,
and that was some years ago.
I remember
30 years ago,
back in '77 when the first cruise missiles were actually coming online through Jimmy Carter. And GPS was really expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah, but now it's basically not less than $10 for a GPS, a decent GPS.
Exactly.
So you mean the GPS? You mean the GPS chip? But the Russians have figured out a way not to use GPS. They basically just use satellites to denote the target location, and then they dial the coordinates in. So the longitude, latitude coordinates into the bomb itself, and then the bomb will go to that location.
Yeah, what I'm saying is the one thing is, the thing is the GPS satellite tells it what coordinates or where. You got to have a unless you
But
have
you can
unless you have a CD-ROM map, then actually.
but you can spoof GPS, which is one of the problems that the U.S. is figuring out now,
Hmm.
when dealing with Russia, right? So they fly their planes over Russia, and they can't get perfect GPS location because the Russians have deterred that.
Hmm.
So you can't even get an accuracy now. This is in Ukraine. They jammed up all the GPS signals.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, you can jam it. You can jam it. The thing is that, um, I'm sure that's what happened when they fired the cruise missiles off the ship. They probably jammed the GPS, so they couldn't find their target.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I mean,
Go ahead, Dr. Phoenix.
no, I was just gonna say we even had portable jammers when I used to be a medic with the EOD team when I was in
Hmm.
Iraq, and we actually had these we had these jammers that was on the lead car in the convoy and the rear car in the convoy,
Hmm.
and we called them warlocks, but they were jammers, and so we used them to jam signals from IEDs. So
Hmm.
I mean, this technology has obviously been around for a very long time,
Hmm.
and so I mean, and even then it was portable enough in sort of a, if you want to call it, more prehistoric state. It was still portable enough to be used in vehicles and such like that. So
Yeah. Because if not, you gotta. If not, you basically have to dial. You have to dial in the. It becomes basically a ballistic missile. You have to dial it in before it's launched.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's the only other way around it, which is GPS is much more efficient.
Hmm.
Because the old ICBMs, the coordinates are actually dialed in before actually not the coordinates, but actually the ballistics are actually dialed in before it even launches, so it doesn't need
That's right.
any coordinates.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So what do you I mean, tonight was the Democratic first debate. What do
Oh.
you guys think about who the candidates are running?
Uh, well, we got to see who's going to survive because they're shooting Democratic candidates down so much. You know,
Mhm.
it's hard to say who's even going to survive to 2020. I think the debates is just a way to actually take some of the stress off of social media. Because social media is killing these candidates.
Oh
It
yeah,
it, it,
I
it,
agree.
it, it it is, but they have to have more debates to really get out here and really start to establish positions. Right now, you're just seeing who's out there. This
Yeah.
is just seeing who's out there right now. But what I do believe, quite frankly, because I'm not going to judge so much on this early debate,
Mm-hmm.
is I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on the Republican Party. I think there's a lot of room to attack. I don't think that Trump.
I,
I,
yeah.
I don't believe this is my thing, and I'll say this very quickly. I
Mm-hmm.
don't believe Trump when he first ran. He it was Hillary who blew it. It wasn't so much that he won it.
True.
Now he's going to have to defend,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's going to have people really coming out there shooting at this guy really hard. So he's going to have to run, and they're going to be shooting at him hard.
Yeah.
So who's going to come out of here is going to be a fairly good shooter. So now whether that'll make a difference, whether they'll win or not is another question. But he's going to have to run because I believe the Democrats are going to be putting up they're going to be putting up some opposition. I think don't underestimate the opposition that the Democrats are going to put up this year. Anyway, go ahead,
Uh,
go ahead.
Everybody on stage is talking about reparations. Oh, we're
Of
gonna do
course
this
they
for
are.
black
of
people
course
and
they are.
HR
Of
40.
course,
Of course
Yeah,
they
Yeah,
are.
of
They have
of
to.
course,
They
of
have
they
to.
course,
have no. I mean,
They
it
got no
is
choice.
of
it's the
course,
buzzword of the day. They have to. They have no choice.
They have no
of course,
choice.
Their
and they got
black
to
support
galvanize the black
will
vote. They
either
know how to do
live
it.
or die on their ability to come up with something that even remotely sounds like
Well,
that.
It's
well, well,
a.
listen. The black
Uh.
vote is going to be critical. It was critical in
Yeah,
the last election because we didn't come out, and that's what got this guy in there. So the real deal, very simply, is you gotta have the vote coming out, and the Democrats are going to do whatever they can to try to galvanize that. Go ahead, BJ.
It's not it's not even the vote. It's social media that's killing them. Every time these guys come up in front of something, in front of a crowd, if black people are digging up so much dirt and spilling out on social media, they're actually soiling these people's reputations before they can even get any kind of momentum. They're killing, basically they're killing the ducks before they can actually rise above the grass. They're shooting them down.
I agree. I'm
Let's
actually
see how
very
long
proud
this
of what.
lasts.
I agree. I'm very proud of what Black folks did because you've had some big name Democrats come out since the beginning of the year, and every single one of them then got destroyed
They
within
get
a matter of
destroyed.
a couple
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah. They brought out the big gun, which is Biden, right? Biden is a big gun. He's not a sucker. He ran for president multiple times. He was vice president.
Big player.
Under Obama, he's a big gun. And they shot his ass down too and said, "Oh, wait a minute. Let's talk about reparations to take some of this pressure off because we can't keep
they called
affording."
him creepy. They called him creepy Joe Biden, right?
Yeah, they were bringing up.
They relegated him to standing outside of Stop and Shop with people working cashiers and baggers, out there, trying to campaign with them, and it's like I don't know, man.
Yeah, but also they brought up the him signing on to the crime bill back in the 90s.
Sure did.
Started mass incarceration. So basically, as far as him being a liberal, you start pulling that stuff because most of the time that stuff is hidden. All right, people don't bring that up unless it's your opponent. When you have black people on social media spreading the negative parts about your record on through YouTube, through Twitter and Facebook. So basically, they're soiling your reputation before you even get a chance. So basically, they have to cut a deal with black people, otherwise, you won't have any Democratic candidates.
They thoroughly understand that. They knew it. They knew from the last election with Hillary and how shitty she was, and let's say mass incarceration and all that, the crime bill, crime bill, that killed her in the black community, and we know, especially amongst a large percentage of black voters, men and some women. We didn't come out. 2 million of us didn't show, and that was it, man. That knocked the Democrats out. They counted the numbers. They know where the balance of power in this game is going to be played. They understand it, and Republicans understand it as well. So I think it's good that this is going on right now. I think it's the early part of the election cycle. Let it play out.
I sent the video. I didn't share the video with everybody. I sent the video to BGS though. From Roland Martin, where he talked about the Democratic Party has a black male issue. They can't galvanize black men.
No,
they made black women the face of the Democratic Party,
and that's a mistake.
They can't galvanize the black women either, because once your reputation gets soiled, especially with the ADOS and reparations question, basically turned the black women against the Democratic Party too. Now it's the women actually saying, okay, what about reparations? What about reparations? You can't wave money in front of a black woman and expect her not to go for it. You say dollars, money, free money. Black women say, wait a minute. I know about all the other stuff, but where's my check?
Oh shit, that's true.
So now they stick the black woman on them.
No, I agree. I mean, the numbers and the current projections are proving to be true. You had 2016, you had about 15% of black males who voted for Trump, and they're projecting those numbers to double in next year's election. So if you get black men over 25% voting for Republicans, Democrats are done. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
But that's what they're saying right now, right? That's what they're saying right now, is that if you look at the two major institutions of power within the black community, which is the Democratic Party and the Black Christian Church, you see that there's parallels between black men leaving the Christian church and going to Islam,
and black men leaving the party,
leaving the Democratic Party and going to Republican, or going independent,
or going independent more than anything else.
Yeah,
they're going independent because a lot of black men are not lining up behind the Democratic Party like that, and they understand that. That's a big part of the.
I'm laughing because with Kamala Harris, I never thought she was a good candidate. When they brought up reparations and she balked, and then they balked, and then they caved in. and once they caved in, it was, basically blood in the water, and sharks are coming for you.
Yep.
So there's no way out of this.
No way out.
It's funny. I've always, from the moment I first saw her on the scene, I knew of her a few years ago, and she always struck me as just an empty suit.
Mm-hmm.
She's just one. Her political views just go with the wind, whatever
Mm-hmm.
direction the wind is going, that's where she's at.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to the interview that Roland Martin did with Willie Brown. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
earlier this year, something like that. He talked a little bit about their relationship back when she was the was it district attorney or whatever, when she was the assistant DA or whatever in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I just thought it was interesting because he didn't say it in so many words, but he pretty much hinted like, yeah, that's who she is. She's a career woman.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
And let me tell you, that white boy she's sporting as a husband ain't helping.
no, she that royally screwed up. I mean, when I think, especially with a lot of black women, I think a lot of black women saw her with that white boy.
That ain't helping.
And white men.
Yeah.
It's the optics. It's the optics. Yeah. And plus you got to factor in that black men marrying outside the race has increased significantly since 2008.
Mm-hmm.
The institutional power of relationships is starting to shift away from black women, and they're starting to feel the impact of this black male desertification. Just brothers just up and leaving.
Well, I think the Democratic Party, once again, because the Democrats are fairly stupid in a lot of what they do. Sitting back saying, this, we're going to make the black woman the face of our vote. That's my how Hillary said that's my shield, or whatever she said. The term she used. Not very bright, very stupid. Separating.
Look at Stacey Abrams, in Georgia, talking about turning black communities into sanctuary cities. This is the black woman saying this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is so that part about me absolutely kills it. I think any black politician that supports the idea of sanctuary cities,
they're Democrats.
I'm in healthcare, and I tell you right now that you look at any medical school, nursing school website, whatever, you got these black folks can't get into these damn programs, but you go on these websites for these schools and you will find, it's all in their mission statement. Yeah, we support DACA, all this stuff, and you can't even find a picture of a black man on most of these schools' websites.
The Democrats have thrown us to the. Well, they said that, actually played that about the Democrats actually throwing black folks under the bus and actually getting on to Hispanic immigrants as the next one of the next power base.
But it's a silly proposition to begin with, because historically, when Hispanics have voted, they've always been pretty split, and I would say probably lean more towards the GOP than even the Democrats.
No. Hispanics, when they look at the Hispanic vote, Hispanics do tend to vote more Democrat than Republican, but that number is actually starting to change a little bit. It was about 70-30, where blacks were like 90, 90-10, and that kind of thing. But that number is changing amongst, as more Latinos come into the country, become more, let's say, established, if you will. They tend to follow along the routes of a lot of immigrants, like Italians and so forth, and they go Republican. And that's what's going on.
I'm done with black people. They won't. Basically, your forefathers basically fought to get you some kind of equity, not equity, but some kind of repair, which is affirmative action. And basically, it was hard to stop the white women from taking the lion's share, but you're gonna let immigrants come in and take what little is left.
That's right.
Okay, I'm 60 years old, man. This is a millennial fight. If you guys don't want to fight for it, go. Be my guest.
I think that's the major problem they have, and that the Democrats have, is with the younger black population. It's with the folks that are 40 and under, the millennials, the Generation Z. You're finding that these folks, they're just not hearing. They're not hearing it. And, given that I am a millennial, but I can tell you, the folks I know, they ain't hearing none of that stuff the Democrats talking about.
They shouldn't. They should fight for it if because those are your jobs, those are your loans, those are your positions, those are your positions in school. If you don't fight for them, guess what? They're gonna give them to somebody else.
Yeah. They're gonna have to step up.
Yeah. I was just telling was it Amir? Ramil, was it Ramil? Amir? I can't remember his name.
Ramil.
Yeah, I was telling him last night. If you think white supremacy is gone, you think it doesn't affect your affect you still. You think that it's culture. No, it's not. Those DACA has nothing to do with your culture. There's nothing to do with you getting loans. There's nothing to do with with the unions hiring DACA Hispanics over your black construction workers. That's what you want. I ain't got nothing to say. You don't want to fight for it? I'm too old. I'm too old. If you don't want to, if I'm 60. Basically, if you guys don't want to get out there, at least protest for it. You got Twitter and all this kind of stuff. You guys don't want to go out there and push back and say I'm an individual. Go ahead.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, again, this is the fight for Black folks in the 21st century. That's not to be completely locked out of the damn economy. I mean, that's literally what Black folks are fighting for in the 21st century, is to not be locked out of the economy. And we've seen this, especially over the last decade or so, where Black men in many ways have been locked out of the economy, and now you're seeing this resurgence of younger Black men that they're getting their shit together, and you're seeing all these things happening. They're completely breaking away from the Democrats. They're trending more conservative. So I mean, again, this is just a natural effect of that.
Well, Black men have largely been, had sanctions put on them through these redlining and other policies. For the most part, they've been disproportionately impacted. I think Black Gnostics had posted the Economic Policy Institute, the EPI report last year, that discussed that Black men are the most disenfranchised group in this country, if not on many different Western nation states. And people will sit up here and tell you that that white supremacy doesn't exist and all this other stuff. But Black men, if you go to LA, you go down Skid Row, one of these places, you'll see plenty of Black men out there being the majority.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I said, when I was talking to you gentlemen last night, a week ago, I was at a homeless shelter. I was there doing vision and eye screenings and health assessments. And I think 60-70% of the folks I saw were brothers.
Yeah.
And they were all between 50 years. I think the oldest one was maybe 51, 52. And they were as young as 18. And this is, I'm in Milwaukee, and again, Milwaukee, the population is only like 14% Black people here. And
is it that high?
Yeah, it's pretty high here in Milwaukee. Now you get outside of the other, you get outside of Milwaukee, that's a different story.
Because Los Angeles, Los Angeles, we're only like 7%. So
I mean, but again, this is, I couldn't agree more. And maybe something, I'll talk about as on another time, where just talk about how Black men get disenfranchised within the health systems and stuff like that. So, but yeah, this is, I couldn't agree with that argument more. I mean, again, this is a major problem for brothers, that systemically we have been disenfranchised more so than any other group of people in this country.
And and that's where I think when we start talking about the manosphere and stuff like that, we have been horrifically remiss in not addressing some of this. There's terribly remiss in that, and that's something that we should. If you're going to call yourself a manosphere, this is something that should be at least spoken about. You can have your entertainment and do everything else like that as well, but let's talk about this stuff too. I mean, we should have a balance here. It's very important because it's going to affect most of us.
I couldn't agree more.
Excellent points. Excellent.
Yeah, as long as you have these institutional practice in place, man, you see brothers, and you can't have a community that votes two different ways. It's impossible. You can't have Black women on one side of the spectrum and Black men on the opposite side of the spectrum and think that you're going to formulate this utopian society, man. It's just not feasible.
You're going to get absorbed. That's what's going to happen. That's why I want to tell the brothers, you want to be an individual, you're going to get absorbed. You can't
No,
say you can't want to say you want to be black or have a black society and say individualism is more important than the group. Okay, it's not. You're gonna get
no,
absorbed.
no. This is not an individual fight. No, we're fighting against a group.
Hmm.
Everyone is playing as a team, and unfortunately, there are a number of brothers out here that think that we're going to be on this individual tip, and you go be a Kobe or LeBron, and that's not how this game works out here.
Hmm.
I mean, especially when brothers thinking about trying to be upwardly mobile and move up this socioeconomic ladder.
Hmm.
This is all of this is a team sport.
Hmm.
We need to have brothers that are in place at all levels of
Hmm.
society and that can help push black men forward and up into these professions, into other avenues within society, so that
Yeah.
we can begin to have a real voice. I mean, the
Hmm.
problem is that largely we've been invisible in this society.
Well, visible enough to be, victims of the system, but invisible in terms of where your stake is.
Yeah, we've been visible, not
Yeah.
in a good way.
Them bullets don't miss though.
Yeah, they like I said. He said, I remember that a friend of mine back when I was in my 20s. He was actually on a sub for like 4 years, right? He used to walk around with a T-shirt, right? So there's only two kind of boats: submarines and targets. The targets are the ones that are visible.
Yeah.
So should black men create their own political party?
Yes, they should. But will they?
I agree. I think they should. I just don't think right now black men have the will. We got too
Or
many.
Or the literacy.
Or take over one, or take over one, like the Green Party should have taken it over.
Yeah.
Just come in wholesale, throw all the black people behind the Green Party, and that becomes our party, and just take it over.
Because I think the Green Party last time around, I think they got something like maybe 5% of the vote. If that.
Yeah.
Popular vote. I think they got like 5%, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no reason now why you shouldn't have hundreds, if not thousands, of black men watching streams like this. Why? Because this speaks to our interests. And so again, if black men aren't interested in liberating themselves, I mean, how do we expect to launch an offensive against a group, against a system, an institution that has victimized us forever?
How do you unbrainwash people? It's always a question. It's a question I've always had. How do you unbrainwash people? And I mean, I've done my part, but it only goes so far.
No, I agree, brother. I'm out here and I'm talking with brothers, and I can't even get brothers to get healthy. I can't even get them to just eat healthy.
Dr.
And
Phoenix, Dr. Phoenix, where are you right now? You having a MRI or something?
No. This ain't me. I don't think this
That's
is me.
Ulysses.
No.
Ulysses, mute up, bro. Sounds like he was getting a shave or something.
No, and what would the name of the party be?
I'm muted.
So what?
What would the name of the party be for brothers? I mean, rather, if you're not going to take over the Green Party, what would the name of the party be? Would it be like the Leroys or something?
No, it would be the closest thing. The closest thing was the Black Panther Party. I would actually the Wakanda Party would actually be a good one.
Yeah, I kind of
recognizable.
like that. I actually kind of like that as well.
Yeah,
you can make Kamala Harris the face of it by when she did her salute.
That little Wakanda forever salute.
It would if she wants to get in line and actually follow the party line. I have no actually. If we had our own party, Kamala Harris would be perfect because she's a political animal. She'll do what she's told.
Yeah.
All politicians will do what they're told if you buy them. And this is what I've been pushing. I've been saying that with black men. Well, I mean, the thing about it is, just all politicians are obligated to their donors. They have obligations. They have obligations that they have to serve to their donors. So what I've always pushed is that. Okay, well, what I've been pushing is that if you have a corporatized infrastructure, because that's what this all is at the end of the day, it's a battle of oligarchies. So if black men were getting their business up, now I get business is sort of a soufflurious type of thing. I guess we're not really supposed to take commerce seriously, but that's what drives all that's been part of the discussion here. So if black men actually had an infrastructure that incorporated that, and then you have to buy your politicians just like every other group does. And there's a lot of black women who are in political positions, is there not? There's a lot of black women who are judges, who are now in places like Dallas, they're heading police departments and all that type of stuff. See, so you have to get them by the ovaries, if you will, and force them to do your bidding. But if we want to sit here and use things like the manosphere to argue back and forth and bicker with them, then you can't actually put them in line and make them effective. So I mean, well, this is a general statement. So what I'm saying is like, just like everyone else, you buy your politicians.
Okay, let me ask you, because they're talking about reparations on the stage. Are any of those politicians bought?
Reparations, the reparations talk is an absolute joke. That's to garner votes. There's nothing serious behind that.
It doesn't matter. It hasn't come up in 100 years. Are any of those politicians actually bought?
Are they bought?
Yes.
No, they're not bought. It's all formality. There's nothing behind it.
In other words, there's other ways of doing things outside of buying politicians. There's many other ways of doing things.
Well, if you want to do corporate disruption, you could do that. You have Wayfair. The Wayfair employees are doing just that, and people like AOC is getting right behind them. Okay. So there's corporate disruption that can take place. I mean, yeah, I agree. There's other methods, but we're talking specifically about what it is that we can do. To get people like a Kamala Harris to do your bidding.
You can do it. You actually can do it without a dollar, without firing a shot. Okay, all you have to do
that's what I said. Corporate disruption.
All you have to do, not even corporate disruption. You have social media, man. All dollars are gonna buy you is attention. Okay, for the most part. All you're gonna do.
That's all social media is gonna do. You have to have an actionable plan behind it. That's all social media is gonna do.
Well, basically, ADOS, whether you like it or not, whether you think it's a joke or not, basically is a brilliant political strategy, because you have the whole Democratic Party basically kowtowing to your interests right now.
Right. Well, you do, because they need votes. But is it going to go any further? Is it going to go any further than just a discussion based on the outlines of the HR 40 bill?
It's not even. The thing is, if you can do that with something that nobody really wants to touch, okay, and nobody really wants to, because reparations, as far as the white population, is actually radioactive. If you have them actually bringing it up,
of course.
The thing is it's not about votes. It's about reputation. You run a reputation as far as politics is concerned, especially in social media. I
don't understand the impact of reputation. I don't understand the impact on reputation when there's actually nothing that's going to be done based on it.
How do you get people to vote for you? What you run on?
What did I just say? I said it's a move to garner votes, nothing more. I just told you that.
In other words, how do you get people to vote for you? In other words,
you pander to them. You pander to them.
What I'm saying is, you run on your reputation, do you not? You run on your
whose reputation? Biden, like people like Joe Biden. Didn't you guys just talk about
Joe Biden?
Go ahead.
Harris, Cory Booker, all those people run on their reputations, right? And basically, every time you bring up something negative in their reputation, their reputation takes a hit as far as the competition is concerned.
Right.
If you can do that, you can.
But the Democratic Party as a whole, how are they to remove Donald Trump at this point?
It doesn't.
Especially if you have black folks, particularly black men, leaving the Democratic Party. Right, votes are leaving the Democratic Party in droves. So how do you bring them back? How do you corral them back?
If you have to you have to start.
And what would be a good method of doing that?
What you gonna keep them up here? What you want me to answer it?
Well, I'm just asking you a question because I'm backing up my point.
You gonna allow me to answer it?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. You will not have if you don't have a reputation, you cannot run, and you will keep getting your candidate shot down, just like you've seen all candidate shot down. That's how come they're actually talking about reparations in front of a.
Of course.
Yeah, that's why.
Of course, and so isn't there like a record number of Democratic candidates running this year for this election? Because there's so many getting shot down, you need so many candidates, right? That all have some sort of varied view, right? Okay, so no, I mean, no, I get it, but what I'm saying is that this whole reparations piece is largely to garner votes. There's nothing behind it. I mean, you can get on social media, you can have all these lively discussions, all of these passionate arguments, and all the stuff that we've even been seeing it on the manosphere. But what I'm saying is, from a policy standpoint, when you look at HR 40, there's nothing behind it. It's just merely just to discuss it. And even then, Mitch McConnell was like, I'm not even going there with it. So what kind of traction do you think it's going to actually garner?
Until those same rape peers turn on him. They haven't turned on him yet. But when they
what reason do they have to?
When they turn on him, they don't, because you're not talking to our interests. So when it turns on him, you're gonna start shooting them down. The press is very important as far as any political campaign. And basically, there's no bigger press than social media. Basically, if you have 500,000, if you give me 500,000 people with no money, 500 black people with no money, I will move.
You have that.
I said, if you give me control of 500,000 people with no money, I will move. I will move the headlines every day. I can move the headlines every day through Twitter. Boom.
Well, you have 30,000. So what are you doing with that?
I said 500,000.
I know, but what I'm saying is you got to start somewhere, right?
Give me 500,000. You can under my control. Half the 30,000 I have don't even like me. Probably more like 20,000 don't even like me. They just follow me.
Do you really think that this really okay?
Yeah, I know so.
I mean, no, we can agree to disagree. I'm just, I'm asking.
How many people tweet ADOS? What do you think?
A whole bunch.
A whole bunch. I mean, give me a number.
A whole bunch.
A whole bunch.
I don't have a number. But I mean, just go by. You can go by the chatter. You can go by the chatter on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. It's a whole lot.
I would say they tweeted in the millions.
Is it in the millions?
Yeah. Probably.
I would have to say a million.
Probably. Yeah.
So basically, that's more than enough. That's more than enough to actually move the goalpost. Basically, if you go by the 6 degrees of separation, every person counts as 6. And if you see that everything, you're gonna start shifting. You're gonna start shifting the narrative, and that's what you want. And sooner or later, somebody's gonna come along, and guess what? What do you want?
I definitely think social media is definitely a force, much more of a force than it was.
Well, Nagon, I mean, that's how the message. Yeah. Well, Nagon, that's how the message has gotten out, is through social media. So there's no argument there. Yes. What I'm saying is that when you look at what this whole reparations piece with regards to the Democratic Party is all about, it's about garnering votes.
Well, of course, it's about garnering votes, and
okay, that's all I'm saying. I mean, there's actually no meat behind it. It's all potatoes.
It's all about garnering votes. But see, at the end of the day, if they're looking to garner votes, and you want to have
you guys, Mike, you should know. Mike can tell you. You guys have a very small following, have a very small group. But the thing is, if you have the right message, you put it out there, you start to move the needle, don't you, Mike?
I agree with that. I think you need people who are diehard, believe in the message, and that galvanizes them. So I don't think you need a large following to get the results.
And if you keep drumming that message, it's going to get out, and it's going to broaden. There's no question.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was saying that when I first came to your hangout, man, we tried to at least I tried to structure it in a way that would garner the proper sort of attention. And using that same formula on this platform, we've been able to go from like 5 or 6 people watching up to 80 people, 90 max. So we've seen exponential growth in support. So to your point, yes.
And there's certain things, there's certain things that certain people want to keep hidden. Or certain people that's public that people don't want brought attention to, right? And basically, if it pops up They're going to have to get out in front of it because they have to counter. They don't want to risk it actually growing out of proportion. So basically, depending on what I mean, there's certain things you can say that can move the needle, and people will come to you and say, okay, if there's enough people, what do you want? What do you want?
Agreed. That's politics. That's how that works.
So what do you guys think would be the tipping point?
There's a few things I could say. I'm not saying anymore because I'm not putting my head on the chopping block. And then we'll come out and say, what do you want? Or because you know exactly where to throw that monkey wrench. You're gonna say, what do you want? Okay, we're willing to concede certain things.
Yeah,
we're not gonna get everything. We don't have enough jack to actually fight the oligarchs. Okay, we don't have enough jack. The power actually exists in the people, believe it or not. That's where the power actually exists. Can you galvanize them? Can you get the herd moving in one direction?
Get enough people. It's definitely going to grab attention, and people are going to ask, well, what are we looking for? What can we work with you on? There's no question about that. That's how that works.
That's what you're saying now. How that works. Because one thing that they do not want to bring up, they'd rather you talk about reparations. What they don't want you to talk about is affirmative action. They don't want you to talk about it because that will bring up a whole can of political worms that they do not want to deal with. Because why do people that weren't born here, came over here illegally, do not have a passport, do not have citizenship, can get the exact same thing, the exact same thing that was promised to black folks as repair back in the 60s. White women weren't supposed to get it. How did people come over the border to get it? And why are black people being shut out and left behind because of that? That's the question that you should be asking.
I guess the question I have: do you think black people have the will to actually really talk about it as candidly as it needs to be?
Depending on how you frame it. Depending on how you frame it. How you want to frame it. Do you want to tell them what's really going on? How to really frame it? Do you want to you basically? Well, I'm harsh. I'm probably too harsh to actually give it to you. Probably guys are probably a little bit more subtle. So, do you want your goddamn kids to work, or do you want them sleeping on your couch with no work for the rest of their lives until they're like 50? Yeah. Or do you as a kid, do you not want your positions actually opened up? To actually get a job, or you want somebody just came over the border because they want a bigger white population to actually get your positions that were actually meant for you, that your forefathers fought for. If you don't want it, basically give it up. But if you want it, you need to go out there and actually not campaign for it, but actually vie for it, because those executive orders are actually still signed and actually passed for you. What are you going to do with it? You gonna let somebody else eat off your plate? The white women already have. Now you don't like another group come up and eat off your plate. Is that what you're gonna allow? Now that's what I would frame it. Now it's up to you. If you can vote for president, you can do whatever you want. You wonder why your neighborhoods are all screwed up, that you don't have no businesses, you don't have any political power, you don't have any financial power, and the white people do, because they're double dipping off of what was supposed to be for you. They take 83% of what's supposed to be for you. If you took what the white women have as far as businesses, loans, money, education, and put it in the black community, what would the black community look like? Would it look like what it looks like now?
No, obviously.
How did they get that?
Huh? President Johnson actually signed it.
How did they get that? There were willing participants that allowed them to get that, right?
I get what
you talking for me?
Yeah.
You talking for me? You interrupted me about 5 times. I'm not saying nothing. You don't let me talk.
I was just asking a question.
I'm not talking.
All right.
BGS, just go forward with it. Your complex. Let's chill here for a second. BGS, bring your point forward, because it's a couple other guys want to get in, because I would definitely like to hear.
Or they can get in if they want to. Basically,
go ahead, BGS. Go ahead.
Basically, it's on the books. Okay, it's on the books. We don't care who's the willing participant of it. It's on the books. Okay, it's been eroded. This has been eroded over the past over 20 years. It didn't happen all at once. Over 20 years, all this shit has been eroded, and now it's being eroded even further by them allowing people that are not citizens to actually come in and cash on the same thing. Are you going to allow it? And they've said it. You got 30 million Hispanics coming in riding your jock that aren't supposed to get it. And now you have LGBTQ, whatever, actually riding on the same thing. And but guess who gets asked out? It's you. When are you going to stand up and actually vie for what's actually signed on for you and actually redo this thing? It doesn't matter who's willing to participate. What are you going to do now?
Well,
what are you going to do now?
Well, I proposed it. I said, look, you build strong business infrastructure and buy politicians.
How long is
because
that
we're not going to get you're not going to get that actually can happen a lot sooner than you think. And the thing about it is this: you're not going to get participation from all black folks. You see, black folks also fall into the whole LGBTQ portion of all this too, right? Like I said, what you have, well, a matter of years, few years actually. I would say 3 to 5 if we were serious.
Really?
But I'm just saying, if you were to take the black manosphere as a microcosm, right? No one's serious. They're not serious. I'm serious. Are you?
How did you learn about the shit in the first goddamn place?
Did you learn about what?
You looked it up on your own, right? Did you look up?
No. Actually, what it is that I didn't look up anything. What? No. Hold on. I don't look up anything. I actually do business. I do business. So this is how I speak on it. This is how I speak on it.
You found it out through me. That's how you found it out. What am I doing about it?
That's bullshit. I find out through you. I've been doing business. I've been doing global business since the late 90s. Okay. No. I'm telling you. I just told you. What were you asking a question? So I'm answering it.
I didn't ask. No, you didn't.
I just answered it.
You know what? Forget it.
Did you ask me how did I find out?
I'm not talking to you no more. Forget
Did you ask me that?
Forget it.
Oh, and I just answered it.
Forget it. Go ahead.
You don't have to.
Go ahead, talk.
Like I said, it takes a whole different approach. Because you don't have participation from all of your people like that. Because black folks are also part of the LGBTQ. They're also part of other things that are going to serve against this greater interest that you're talking about. See, so if it's gonna happen somehow, you're gonna have to rethink this whole thing.
Not me, you.
Oh, what? So, what do you think I'm over here pushing? What do you think I'm doing?
No, leave me alone. You do it.
I know. No. That's exactly. And I've taken on the mantle, and I'm actually doing the work. I'm actually doing it.
Leave me alone. You do it.
Well, wait a minute. If I'm pushing,
leave me alone. You do it.
You do it. Why is it that you have an issue with people who have an opposing narrative to you, right?
You do it.
All right, DJS. All right, master teacher, you're fine. Leave me alone. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings.
No. Leave me alone, okay? I'm trying to be nice because I'm a guest. Because I'm a guest.
But you got the answers, though.
You don't know shit, but you're trying to pretend like you don't know shit. Because if you knew, you'd be doing what I'm doing.
Sure.
How come you're not?
Talking about what, black women?
No. How come you're not?
Holding women's hangouts? No, I don't. That's not what I do.
Why am I holding women's hangouts?
Don't care. You're telling me if I knew what the answer was, you're telling me if I knew what the answer was, I would be doing